Chapter 27:19. Lung Mei's face quickly turned red. She felt like her face was being burned by fire. She was so embarrassed that she couldn't control herself. What the hell is this? I don't want it. Lung Mei rolled her eyes and pretended that she didn't understand the contents of the album Di Lin gave her. She pursed her lips and reached out with her slender and beautiful hand, wanting to tear the album apart. How could she possibly keep something that would make her feel extremely shy? Other things aside, if someone were to see it, would she still have any face left? Just as Lung Mei was about to tear the album apart, Di Lin seemed to have known what she was going to do. He used his body, which was even taller than Lung Mei, to snatch the album from her hands. As a wedding gift, it's better for me to keep it. As Di Lin spoke, he raised the album high and turned to walk out of the door. Lung Mei was 1.7 meters tall. The moment Di Lin took the album from her hand, she jumped up to grab the album in the air but couldn't reach it. Give it to me. Give it to me. Leader, can you give it to me? I'll do whatever you want in the future. Give it to me. Lung Mei chased after Di Lin all the way out of the room. No one saw that the moment Di Lin walked out of the room with the album that Lung Mei begged for as she ran, his cold smile was slightly raised. There were still 2 weeks before the wedding that Di Lin promised her. In the garden. Lung Mei, who was taking Di Lin for a walk in the garden, had asked him for the 190th time. Are you really going to marry me? In return, Di Lin replied patiently, yes. He had been waiting for this day for a long time. Lung Mei gulped and looked up at Di Lin. She used a different method to ask the original question. Then, are you really going to marry me? Yes. Di Lin didn't get annoyed by Lung Mei's question. His slender hand interlocked with Lung Mei's slender hand. He stared at her with undisguised adoration and replied solemnly. Lung Mei gulped softly, suppressing the joy in her heart that could not be expressed. She smiled and looked at Di Lin. Is this okay? I was only your mistress before. At this critical moment, Lung Mei became shy. She glanced at Di Lin like a flower waiting to blossom. Before she could finish her sentence, Di Lin grabbed her wrist and said coldly, Don't worry, Mississippi, who said you were my mistress? He had never treated her as his mistress. That's what the organization said. I was only 16 back then and you forced me. Isn't that your mistress? Lung Mei didn't understand why Di Lin was so angry. She turned around and pouted. Just as she was about to explain, Di Lin's expression changed. A large head had already descended from above. He used his handsome lips to capture her small mouth tightly, and they tossed and turned. Damn it! Who was the one who said the word, mistress? From the very beginning, he had never intended to treat her as his mistress. It was only a matter of time before she married him. On the day of Di Lin and Lung Mei's wedding, Yun Jian and the others were invited to visit as promised. Sister Jian, why don't I see Lung Mei and her husband? Qing Yu tugged at Yun Jian's arm and asked her excitedly. Sob, sob, sob. Lung Mei is getting married. Will she still play mahjong with us in the future? Gu Nianji rubbed her eyes, which did not have any tears at all, and said with a pained expression. What mahjong? You'd better get rid of that stalker who's been following you. Qing Yu shook Gu Nianji's arm lightly and glanced behind her. She saw a man in plain clothes standing there. It was obvious that he was waiting for Gu Nianji. It was Li Nong. Right, Sister Jian, where do you think Lung Mei went? Why hasn't she come out to play with us yet? Qing Yu stomped her foot and asked Yun Jian. Yun Jian's lips curled into a half-understood smile as she chuckled faintly. Maybe she's doing something unspeakable. In a certain bridal room. The wedding was not over yet. Don't. Chief, don't tear it. Be gentle. You'll be found out later if you tear the wedding gown. Her soft and delicate female voice was met with a certain someone's deeper treatment. The night was still young. Their story was not the end but the beginning. Chapter 27:20. How nice would it be if you were a boy? If you weren't a girl, you'd be the boss. You'd be the most favored eldest son of the Cheng family. God, why are you doing this to us? The words Shinji had heard the most since he was young were his mother hiding in her room, wiping away her tears as she nagged. She was a girl, not a boy. This was her mother's lifelong hatred. She hated that she was not a boy and could not bring her mother a promotion in the Cheng family. Therefore, Shinji had been ordered around by the Cheng family since she was young. She was already tired and numb. Although Shinji was young, she was very mature. When she was 5 years old, she chose to escape from such a family. She knew that her mother, who hated and loved her at the same time, followed her all the way. After she chose to leave with someone who gave her snacks, her mother, the woman named Yun Hua, hid in a corner and cried for a long time. She was only 5 years old, a little girl who did not even know what death meant. Her disappointment in the word, mother, was something that outsiders would never understand. In the end, the woman who called her mother only dared to hide in a corner and cry as she watched her leave. In her first year in the Inhun organization, Shinji was already invincible. Perhaps others did not know why she was invincible, but she knew it very well. That was because after she was cruelly abandoned by her family, she no longer cared about her life and survival. Even if she died, such a life without goals was meaningless to her. People who were relaxed and unburdened were more likely to succeed because they were alone in the world and did not need to leave any way out for themselves. On the other hand, those who had families, children, and people they cared about would be overcautious and could only be ordinary people for the rest of their lives. Shinji belonged to the former. Like slaying God, she risked her life when she was ruthless. Even if someone stabbed her with a knife, she would not care about her wound and would kill her opponent first. Just like that, when she first entered the Inhun organization, almost none of the children were her match. That was until she met the girl who had lost her confidence in survival but reignited her goal, 006. She had defeated her. She even looked down on her. Loser. Shinji could not help but feel her blood boil when she heard that, 006, I'll remember you. I'll defeat you. The young Shinji shouted at slaying God. From then on, defeating slaying God became Shinji's only goal. This was Shinji's goal and at the same time, it was her motivation to survive. She did not have a good childhood. She did not miss her past. She had even thought of giving up on life. Perhaps to others, defeating slaying God was just a display of competitiveness. To Shinji, it was her motivation to survive. It was no longer a display of competitiveness, but a goal that she would never forget. However, one day the woman she would never be able to defeat, slaying God, died. When Shinji first heard the news, she was thunderstruck, but she chose to continue living because she had chosen to protect Wuxia mercenaries on behalf of slaying God, that foolish woman. She knew that she would not leave. She would come back one day. Slaying God in 2019. But Shin slaying T slaying. She just wanted to have a good sleep, a sleep that she would never wake up from. She wanted to fight again in her next life. By then she would definitely defeat slaying God. She would never go back on her words. Come. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 27-21. No. Please don't bully me, I'll listen to you. I'll listen to everything you say. Please don't bully me anymore. The moment Lin Mingyu pushed her into the toilet, the original owner of Yun Jian's body, Yiji, was terrified. Little bitch. You seduced my man, do you think I'll let you go just like that? Go. Shove her head into the cesspool in the toilet. Make her eat shit all over her face. Let's see if Ingjun still likes this bitch's face in the future. Lin Mingyu ordered her two lackeys mercilessly. At this moment, Lin Mingyu's two lackeys pressed Yiji's shoulders and pushed her into the smelly toilet. Yiji's fear came from the depths of her soul, and her expression changed. The next second she fainted and her mind went blank. When Yiji woke up again, she was in a storeroom. She pressed her head and forced herself to sit up straight with a trembling face. But when she saw a male figure suddenly appear in front of the storeroom under the moonlight, Yiji was so scared that her whole body trembled. Just as she was about to shout, the male figure standing far away appeared in front of her in a flash and reached out to cover her lips. Don't talk, the man said coldly. Under the moonlight, Yiji hugged her body in fear and didn't say anything else. But she saw a faint light coming in from the window and shining on the man's face. The man was wearing a ghost mask all the time, which gave Yiji a great fright. Ah! Yiji was so scared that she shrank into the corner as fast as she could, but she still couldn't help but scream. Yuan Jin massaged his forehead and walked towards Yiji. Yuan Lin. If there's anything you don't understand you can ask me, Yuan Lin said coldly to Yiji and nodded. He came here with a purpose, to find Yiji. From Yuan Lin's words, Yiji learned that she had been reborn into another person's body. And her original body was Yun Jian's. She was just a puppet that couldn't be contained in this world, a puppet that shouldn't have been born in this world. The moment she knew the truth, Yiji shrank her body and replied to Yuan Lin with a single word, "Oh." The original owner of Yiji's body was called Yiji. She was a little beggar and now she was doing odd jobs in a brothel. Because Yiji's body was shriveled and she looked thin, no one wanted her even when she was married. So she was just doing odd jobs in the brothel, that was all. Yuan Lin didn't seem to have a proper job. She was doing odd jobs and Yuan Lin just stood there and watched without saying a word. Ping! Yiji was wiping the bowls and chopsticks on the table. Suddenly, the bowls and chopsticks fell to the ground. She quickly squatted down to pick it up. Little bitch. I told you to be careful. How dare you smash the bowl? At this time, the mother of the brothel saw this scene, grabbed the feather duster and rushed over to beat them. Estesti Yuan Lin estitest. Yuan Lin was cruel. To him, Yiji was just a stranger. He wasn't a stallion that would reach out to any woman. Please don't hit me, sob, please don't hit me. Yiji woke up from her dream. She saw Yuan Lin standing beside her. She was so scared that she hugged her chest and shrank into the corner. Yuan Lin's eyes twitched when he saw the tears in her eyes. He didn't say anything. He grabbed Yiji's ankle and dragged her out from the corner of the bed. Then he tore off her clothes. Yiji wasn't wearing a bra. Her chest looked flat. Yuan Lin never saw Yiji as a woman. But when Yuan Lin tore off Yiji's clothes, her chest, which was wrapped under her clothes, looked flat but was abnormally full. Seeing the scene in front of him, Yuan Xing's entire body froze. What are you doing? Yiji was scared by Yuan Lin's action. She shrank back into the corner and wrapped the blanket around her chest. At this moment, Yuan Xing walked to Yiji's side and pulled her clothes away from her chest. He said indifferently, "Apply the medicine." When Yiji heard this, although she was shy, she gave up struggling. What Yiji didn't know was that when Yuan Jin was applying the medicine on Yiji's body, his eyes were always attracted by the beautiful scenery in front of her chest. His eyes kept glancing there. Author has something to say. Author Yan's QQ number is 2625702229. Her new book's character design is the first post on the forum. Everyone can take a look. Come. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2722. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. Yiji didn't notice that Yuan Xing was looking at places he shouldn't be looking at when he was applying medicine on her back. Without the cover of the blanket, Yiji was naturally a little embarrassed. She wrapped her hands around her chest and let Yuan Xen apply medicine on her injured chest and back. Take your hand away, Yuan Xing said seriously when he saw Yiji covering a place she shouldn't be looking at. With that, Yiji's face turned slightly red. But I'm embarrassed. However, before she could finish her sentence, Yuan Xing had already reached out and pulled Yiji's hand away from her chest. He applied medicine on her. After that, Yuan Xing didn't look at Yiji again. He was like a homosexual who had no interest in women. He turned and left. Yiji shrunk her body and looked at the place where Yuan Jin disappeared. She swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said nothing in the end. Days passed by. Yiji helped to serve tea at the back of the brothel. Her small face was covered in black charcoal. It covered her original beauty and made her look ordinary. On top of that, she had a small and shriveled body. Therefore, in the brothel, even though Yiji was a woman, none of the customers liked her. They would even take a detour when they saw Yiji. However, Yiji was very hardworking. Although she was often beaten by the mamas in the brothel, they didn't hit her anymore. Yuan Xing. Yuan Xing. On this day, Yeji rushed into her room with a letter in her hand. Her life in the brothel was getting better and better with her own skills. Mama Mulberry also liked her more and more because of her diligence and her ability to work as hard as 3 people. He's not here. Yiji looked around and didn't see Yuan Xing. She put down the letter in her hand. She sounded disappointed. Looking for me? Just as Yiji was disappointed, a man's voice came from behind her. Yuan Xing. Yuan Xing. Look at this. Yiji heard Yuan Xing's voice. Her disappointment turned into joy. She put the letter in front of Yuan Xing. What's this? Yuan Xing took the letter and opened it. There were a few dollar notes in the letter. They were old and worn. The money I earned. It's a reward from Mama Mulberry. Yiji happily raised her head and puffed out her chest. Come with me. Let's go buy some candied fruits. Yiji grabbed Yuan Xing's cold hand and ran out. They bought 2 candied fruits. Yuan Xing took one for her. Yiji sat by the roadside and licked the candied fruits carefully. She didn't want to eat them all. Yuan Xing was bored. He was in the 90s. He had a mission. He didn't think he was Yiji editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, but for some reason he couldn't walk. She watched as Yiji licked all the candied haws until not even a speck was left. Yuan Xing stretched out his hand and handed over the candied haws that he had not eaten. Aren't you not? Yiji licked her hand, which still had a trace of the sweetness of the tanghulu. She raised her head and looked at Yuan Jin, who was handing her the tanghulu, with a look of surprise. Yuan Xing looked away. He didn't look at her swaying upper body as he answered Yiji. Yiji looked excited and happy. She sat on the flower bed and swayed her upper body. The girl didn't know that her swaying posture reminded a certain someone of the endless scene he saw when he applied medicine for her. A certain someone had a physiological reaction because of her actions. Book Guesthouse Reading Website. Chapter 27-23. Although Yiji was timid, it was the kind of fear that came from the depths of her soul. However, being timid didn't mean that Yiji was stupid. On the contrary, Yiji was quite smart. When she was reborn into this little beggar's body, although she had an unforgettable fear of people, Yiji understood that in a place like a brothel, a girl had to disguise herself if she wanted to leave with a clean record. Therefore, she didn't hesitate to make herself look dirty every day. She smeared her face until it was as black as charcoal and her entire body looked like it had rolled in a smelly ditch. People would smell her from afar and wouldn't want to get close to her. However, no matter how smart Yiji was, she couldn't tell that Yuan Xing had a physiological reaction to her. After licking the candied hawthorn in her hand, Yiji walked back with Yuan Xing side by side. Halfway through, Yiji touched her dirty face and turned her head to look at Yuan Xing with a smile. "Yuan Xing, I'm saving money now. When I have enough money, can I go home?" The home she was referring to was the home with Qin Yiru and Yun Yi. Although Yiji already knew from Yuan Xing that she was a puppet that the heavens and earth couldn't tolerate, a soul that didn't belong to this world, she had to endure hardships. As long as she went back, her mother and brother wouldn't mind having an extra mouth to feed. Moreover, she could have an elder sister, the original owner of her body, Yun Jian. "Okay," Yuan Xing responded. Yuan Xing didn't know that his response made Yiji work harder in the brothel. However, the good times didn't last long. The brothel was closed down and the brothel owner's expenses were reduced to zero. Therefore, he sold Yiji to Sister Lu, who worked in the entertainment industry. This time, the bitter days of the past reappeared. Sister Lu arranged for Yiji to stay at the bottom of the stairs, a place that couldn't even be compared to a small attic. She made Yiji follow the crew every day and act as a logistics support, moving heavy props around. Sometimes, when she wasn't satisfied, she would be beaten by Sister Lu. Yuan Xing didn't stop Sister Lu from hitting her once. Instead, he followed Yiji and only stood to the side and watched when Yiji was bullied. When Yiji was covered in wounds, he would apply medicine for her. To Yuan Jin, Yiji was an insignificant person. This was one of the reasons why Yuan Jin could only watch and not do anything. The second reason was that the mysterious man was still secretly searching for him, so he couldn't expose his whereabouts. After Xing Feng was captured, Xing Feng entrusted all the hopes of changing the future to Yuan Xing. If Yuan Xing went to find Yun Jian now, he would be discovered by the mysterious man. Besides, the time wasn't right. He couldn't ruin all his plans just because of a woman who didn't mean anything to him, Yiji. Moreover, Yiji had never complained about it. On the contrary, when Yiji was bullied, the first person she thought of was him. She would complain to him about the injustices she had encountered. No matter what happened, she would immediately complain to him. But just when Yuan Xing thought that Yiji would always treat him as the first person in her life to talk to, the first person she cared about, one day Yiji met Yun Jian. Not only did Yun Jian tell Yiji that she was under her protection, she even helped Yiji hit the top actress in front of everyone. This made Yiji's heart pound like a little deer. As usual, when Yuan Xing came to Yiji's bedroom that day, he saw Yiji staring at a corner and smiling foolishly. In the past, at this time, Yiji would have already complained to him or told him what she had always wanted to say. But today, "What are you smiling about?" Yuan Xing couldn't help but interrupt Yiji's smile. But she asked him if he was looking for her to send a letter to Yun Jian. Of course, Yuan Xing denied it. Who would have thought that Yiji would say something that would cause Yuan Jin's heart to choke? "Then you don't have to look for me in the future. I have friends." She was chasing him away. This was the first time she said something like that to him. Chapter 27-24. Okay. Yuan Xing's handsome face under the mask only twitched a little. He had only uttered a simple and nonchalant "okay" back then and turned to leave. Only God knew how complicated his feelings were back then. Yuan Xing had indeed left. A few days later, however, Yuan Xing could not help looking for Yiji again. He did not know that Yiji was trying on the hair clip that Yun Jian had given her. Yuan Xing had to admit that a ball of anger was slowly burning within him. He thought that Yiji would have a good chat with him after not seeing him for so many days. Who would have thought that Yiji would extend her hand to ask for a letter, saying that she had told him not to look for her if he had nothing to do and that if he did, it would be because he had something for her to pass to Yun Jian. Of course he did not. Yuan Xing was furious. Still, he took out the hair clip and gave it to her. Yiji misunderstood and thought that he was giving the hair clip to Yun Jian. Later, Sister Lu appeared and wanted to hit Yi Ji. For some reason, Yuan Xing felt that Yi Ji would completely distance herself from him if he did not do anything. Hence, he did. After that, when Yuan Xing looked for Yi Ji again, she had already been brought back to Longmen City by Yun Jian. Yuan Xing did not plan to meet Yun Jian back then. The timing was not right. However, he could not help himself from not seeing Yi Ji, so he took the risk of being caught by Yun Jian and snuck into Yi Ji's room again and again. Like a thief, he would sneak in when Yun Jian was not home. However, he went to Longmen City and took the risk to look for Yi Ji a few times. The last time, Yi Ji pouted and chased him away. "If you're fine, don't come looking for me anymore. I'm going to school soon. Also, if you come looking for me here often, Sister Yun Jian won't be happy." Sister Yun Jian. Yi Ji kept calling her Sister Yun Jian, infuriating Yuan Xing. Grabbing her hand, he pulled Yi Ji along and jumped out of the villa's second-floor window without another word. Yi Ji clung to his clothes in fright, her small body leaning into his embrace. At this moment, Yuan Lin's annoyed mood finally eased a little. Yi Ji was taken away by Yuan Xing again. When Yuan Xing came to this era, the Four Seas were his home. But it was different from before. In the past, he was the one who watched over Yi Ji's life. Now he was the one taking care of Yi Ji. He wanted Yi Ji to have a better life. Holding Yi Ji's small hand, Yuan Xing felt great satisfaction for the first time. "Do you want to eat tanghulu?" Yuan Xing asked Yi Ji. Yuan Jin did not have a fixed home. He had no one to rely on. Although he did not lack money, he would not stay in one place for too long. He brought her to a hotel before they even went to a city. But she didn't seem happy. "Oh." Yi Ji nodded listlessly as Yuan Ying held her hand. Yuan Jin bought 10 sticks of tanghulu for Yi Ji. Yi Ji ate in small bites, but she was still unhappy. "Do you want to eat anything else?" Yuan Jin asked as he reached out and wiped the candied haws stuck to Yi Ji's mouth. His tone was still cold, but Yuan Xing knew that this was the greatest gentleness he could give in all these years. He and Xing Feng had traveled to so many places and killed so many people just to change the fate of Yun Jian's group. Their hearts had long since died. But for Yi Ji, he had no choice but to reopen his heart. "I don't want to." Yi Ji shook her head. She suddenly raised her head. Under Yuan Xing's expectant gaze, she shared her girlish secret with him like before. Yuan Xing, I'll tell you a secret, okay? I'm listening." Yuan Xing's lips curled up slightly. He thought that Yi Ji would become dependent on him again, but he didn't expect to hear this sentence. "I think I've fallen in love with Yun Jian." Come. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 27-25. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. In the past, when Yun Jian treated Yi Ji well, Yi Ji only hid in a corner and secretly rejoiced. Seeing this, Yuan Xing felt extremely displeased in his heart. Seeing Yi Ji hiding in a corner and secretly reminiscing about Yun Jian, Yuan Xing was very unhappy. This time Yi Ji was even more ruthless. Just when Yuan Xing thought that she would secretly tell him her little secret like before, she suddenly said this. Yuan Xing's face instantly turned darker than a frying pan. But that was not all. Yi Ji's next sentence was even more ruthless. "It's not that kind of like it's. I feel like it's the kind of like a girl has for a guy." Yuan Xing's face only darkened, but in reality, his heart was very complicated. I don't know if it's that kind of like." Before Yuan Xing's face could finish darkening, Yi Ji suddenly covered her face and shook her head shyly. That face of a little girl who had a crush on someone and confided in someone she trusted looked very much like love. And Yuan Xing was not the one Yi Ji had a crush on, but the one Yi Ji confided in. His face could no longer be described as dark. "Anyway, I feel that Sister Yun Jian is very, very handsome." "Alright, Yuan Xing, do you know where Sister Yun Jian went? Let's go find her together. I feel like I haven't seen her in a long time." Yi Ji gradually recovered from her crush. She was already holding Yuan Xing's hand and looking up at him. Although Yuan Xing would not help her when she was bullied in the past, he would unconditionally agree to go wherever she wanted to go. Yi Ji thought that Yuan Xing would agree immediately. Who knew that Yuan Xing would reach out and grab her little hand? He did not even care that the candied haws in her arms had fallen to the ground. He rejected her directly. No. After that, Yuan Xing pulled Yi Ji and dragged her away. Why not? However, Yi Ji didn't ask this question. She forcefully swallowed the last question she wanted to ask. Over the next few days, Yuan Li brought Yi Ji to several cities and wandered to many places. Yi Ji had been sulking the whole time. She only ate a few mouthfuls of food and curled up in the corner of the bed when she slept. Her expression was dull and lifeless. She didn't even bother to look at her favorite candied hawthorn. People who had family in their hearts, no matter how far away they were from home, no matter how much they wanted to leave home in their childhood, once they left, they would want to fly back to their parents' side. Yiji was just like that. In less than 2 months, Yuan Xing could not bear to send Yiji back to Longmen City. Yiji happily returned home and went back to school. At first, Yuan Xing really left alone. Later on, Yuan Xing would think of Yiji every night, so he decided to stay by her side. Yiji, who had returned to school, was very afraid of her classmates. It was a kind of fear that came from the depths of the soul. A puppet that shouldn't exist in this world couldn't control when facing a human. But it was different from the past. Yiji worked very hard in school to make herself brave. Just like what Yun Jian had said, she was a human, a version of herself with a physical body. In spite of that, bullying of the weak still happened in school. There was once when Yiji covered her ears and was dragged to the corner of the school by 5 to 6 girls. Yiji squatted in the corner, not daring to lift her head. Just as the 5 or 6 girls were about to beat Yiji up, a sudden gust of wind blew in all directions. In that gust of wind, there were also countless small stones, all of which smashed onto the bodies of the 5 or 6 girls, frightening them to the point that they did not dare to make a move against Yiji. Since then, whenever anyone dared to bully Yiji in school, a supernatural phenomenon would occur. This surprised Yiji, but she did not think much of it. In fact, it was all done by Yuan Xing, who had been hiding in the corner and observing her every move. Risking being caught by Yun Jian, Yuan Xing thought he was crazy. He did not even bat an eyelid when anyone bullied Yiji in the past. Now he wished he could skin whoever dared to bully Yiji. Translator, Henyi Translations Editor, Henyi Translations. Chapter 27-26. The matter of Yuan Xing secretly protecting Yiji had always been very covert and had never been discovered by anyone. Until, one day Yun Jian came to school to find Yiji and slapped her in public. Yuan Xing knew that Yun Jian did this to lure him out. But he couldn't help but stand up. After Yun Jian left, Yuan Xing still pretended that he never cared about Yiji. In fact, he was still secretly protecting her. Until the war came and they won the war. Everything was over. The mysterious man was also completely destroyed. Yuan Xing and Xing Feng, who came from the future, also bid farewell to everyone in the forest of time and space. Yuan Xing thought that he could go back to the year 2004 from 2019 to find Yiji through the time and space portal. But who would have thought that the time and space portal would not open after 20 minutes? Yuan Xing was anxious, so he grabbed Yiji's hand and said to her, "Come with me." Then, afraid that Yiji would not agree, Yuan Xing added, "I'll marry you." The moment Yiji agreed, what outsiders didn't know was that Yuan Xing heaved a sigh of relief. He grabbed Yiji's hand and led her into the time and space portal with joy. What Yun Jian and the others didn't know was that Yiji, who had agreed to go with Yuan Xing, suddenly wanted to go back on her words the moment she stepped into the time and space portal. Yuan Xing, I think I'd better." She was still a little scared, even though she would still meet her parents, Yun Jian and the others after arriving there. But they were all from the future. She had been absent from their lives for so many years. What if they didn't like her anymore? What if they didn't remember her? What if, "You've already come this far. Do you think you still have room to go back on your words?" Yuan Xing laughed heartily. He waved his hand and led Yiji into the time and space portal. Xing Feng snickered a couple of times behind him. Then he coughed dryly for a moment before following closely behind. Yiji had just arrived in the year 2019 and came to the future world. There were many things she couldn't adapt to. At first she was scared. However, she found that after more than 10 years, Yun Jian, Qin Yiru, and Yun Yi did not forget her. Moreover, her sister Yun Jian looked exactly the same as she did in 2004, more than 10 years ago. She was still youthful and beautiful, and her appearance had not aged at all. This made Yeji feel very close to him. The next day, Yuan Xing went to Qin Yiru's house to propose marriage to Yiji, intending to complete the marriage process. The night before the wedding in Yeji's boudoir, Yiji was still clutching her fluttering heart. She could not believe that she was actually going to marry Yuan Xing. Moreover, she wanted to cry but had no tears. Originally she liked cool girls like Yun Jian. Why did she suddenly agree to marry Yuan Xing? Yiji covered her face out of habit and blushed. Can I refuse him? Yiji thought for a long time in her little head. In the end, she looked at herself in the mirror and shook her head twice. She pouted and asked herself in the mirror. No. She was just talking to herself, but suddenly she got a reply. Yiji looked in the direction of the voice in shock. She saw Yuan Xing walking toward her. When did you come in? Yiji was shocked. I'm here to check on my bride in advance. Yuan Xing smiled wickedly. He took 3 steps forward and grabbed Yi Ji's hand, pressing her down on the makeup table. Don't tear my clothes. Yuan Xing. If you do this again, I'll get angry. I'm really angry. Don't. What's this feeling? Don't. It's so embarrassing. Don't touch there. That's so dirty. Don't lick it. Come. Wonderful book house. Chapter 27:27. The little girl Si Yuan, the little guy Si Luo, and Zhou Yiran grew up together. Because the 3 of them were born early and were about the same age. When the 4 leaders of the Inhun organization except for Adam were born, the little girl, the little guy, and Zhou Yiran were already free to do whatever they wanted. Perhaps it was because Yun Jian had been to the future world and saw Si Yuan being bullied, so Si Yuan was asked by Yun Jian to train together since she was young. Although she didn't ask too much, she suffered a lot. Zhou Yiran and the little guy Si Luo were thrown into the Amazon forest by Si. They were accompanied by venomous snakes and fierce beasts day and night. Although the 3 of them grew up together, Zhou Yiran and Si Luo obviously spent more time together than Si Yuan. The 3 of them did grow up together, but after the age of 7, Si Yuan could only see Zhou Yiran and her brother Si Luo for 3 months in a year. This was naturally because Zhou Yiran and Si Luo were thrown into the Amazon forest for the rest of the 9 months. When Si Yuan was 14, she was already as curvy as Yun Jian. Because she defeated the mysterious man and changed the future history, Si Yuan had always been under the protection of her parents. This year, Si Yuan, who had just finished junior high school, went home with a small school bag. She hadn't seen Zhou Yiran and Si Luo for 5 months. She walked out of the school gate with 2 ponytails swaying. As soon as she walked out of the school gate, she saw her brother Si Luo and Zhou Yiran. Si Luo's appearance was very similar to Si Yi's. There was a trace of elegance in his handsomeness that made everything in the world lose their color. But compared to Si Yi, Si Luo's appearance was a bit wilder. The 14-year-old Si Luo was already 1.75 meters tall. Zhou Yiran, who was 3 or 4 years older than Si Yuan and Si Luo, was already 1.82 meters tall. Both of them were extraordinarily handsome. Just by standing there, they could attract the admiration of countless women. When Si Yuan walked out of the school gate, she was still holding a pink envelope in her hand. When she saw the 2 of them, she hid the envelope behind her back and ran over. Brother Yiran. Si Yuan called out sweetly. Yo, what did our little Si Yuan hide? Si Luo suddenly took the envelope from behind Si Yuan with a smirk. Brother. Return it to me. Si Yuan blushed when Si Lan snatched the envelope away. She used the method that Yun Jian had taught her to snatch the envelope away from Si Lan. Ordinary people would not be able to withstand this self-defense technique, but it was nothing to Si Wen. Si Dan turned sideways and opened the envelope. With a smirk, he read out the words on the envelope. Student Zhu Ziho, your handsome silhouette has already reflected my heart. I adore you. Ever since you, that whatever, started cleaning up for me, I've adored you. Can I ask you to date me? Ha. Si Yuan, you even have a crush on someone and write a love letter. Haha, I'm dying of laughter. Sly laughed as he held the letter high in the air. Give it back to me. Give it back to me. Si Yuan was furious. When Zhou Yiran heard that Si Yuan had given a love letter to the boy beside her, his eyes flickered. Taking advantage of his height, he snatched the envelope from Si Yuan's hands and tore the love letter in front of Si Yuan and Si Yuan. Then Zhou Yiran sneered. A pile of scrap paper, ha. Si Yuan and Si Yuan. It had been 2 weeks since Si Yuan and Zhou Yiran returned. On this day, Zhou Yiran had just woken up and was about to go for his morning exercise. When he passed by Si Yuan's room, he was suddenly attracted by Si Yuan, who was hiding behind the door with only one eye exposed. Brother Yiran, can you come over for a moment? Si Yuan looked at Zhou Yiran with a dying gaze. Zhou Yiran walked over. However, he saw Si Yuan stretching out her bloody hands from behind. She was so scared that her face turned pale. She said to Zhou Yiran with a frightened expression, Brother Yiran, I'm about to die. Big brother Yiran, I think I'm about to die. What should I do? My thigh has been bleeding since I woke up this morning. I couldn't find a wound even after searching for a long time. Can you help me take a look? Come. Wonderful book house. Chapter 27:28. Si Yuan was curled up in her room, only half of her body sticking out. She frowned, her little face red and flustered. She had been bleeding for an hour. If she continued to bleed, she would die soon. Seeing that Zhou Yiran, who was standing in front of her, was stunned after hearing her words and was not in a hurry to reply to her, Si Yuan lowered her little face. Her face was already pale from fright. Forget it, Big Brother Iran, you don't have to look anymore. I must have contracted some incurable disease. Help me call Big Brother, Mommy and Daddy over. Before I die, I want to tell them personally that I love them. As Si Yuan spoke, her tears were about to fall. This scene made Zhou Yiran's heart soften. In the next second, Zhou Yiran stepped forward and reached out to touch Si Yuan's head. Unlike his usual indifference in front of Si Yuan, he smiled and rubbed Si Yuan's head. Silly girl, you won't die. When Yun Jian was alone in Si Yuan's room, she explained the reason for the bleeding before changing Si Yuan's bread. Si Yuan was curled up in her bedroom blanket, burying her head and body in the blanket. After hearing Yun Jian explain the reason for the bleeding, Si Yuan was so embarrassed that she buried her head in the blanket and couldn't raise it. She actually asked Zhou Yiran to check her wound just now. It was such a hidden place. If she really let Zhou Yiran check it for her, he must think that I'm stupid. So embarrassing, so embarrassing. I don't want to see Zhou Yiran anymore. That guy is so annoying. Si Yuan used her cold little hands to hold her cheeks. She curled up in the blanket and tossed and turned, embarrassed and embarrassed. These words Si Yuan directly ridiculed, because basically no one would enter her room. But who knew that just as she said this, the blanket that Si Yuan was covering was lifted. Si Yuan was suddenly stunned. When she reacted, she saw Zhou Yiran's handsome face. Why does Si Yuan hate me? Zhou Yiran looked at Si Yuan with an evil smile and repeated Si Yuan's words. Big Brother Yiran, why are you here? The person Si Yuan didn't want to see the most right now was Zhou Yiran. She covered herself with the blanket and desperately shrank into the corner. Drink this. Zhou Yiran stopped joking with Si Yuan and handed her a bowl of brown sugar water. When Si Yuan saw this, she forced herself to forget the awkwardness and shame she felt just now. She took the brown sugar water from Zhou Yiran's hand and carefully put it to her lips, gently sipping it. When Zhou Yiran placed his hand in front of her abdomen without warning, Si Yuan was suddenly startled. She shrunk her stomach and moved her body back by 2 inches. Does it hurt? Zhou Yiran gently rubbed Si Yuan's stomach and asked softly. Si Yuan looked at Zhou Yiran blankly and shook her head. At this moment, Si Yuan's phone rang. Hearing the ringtone, Si Yuan suddenly reacted. She picked up the phone and answered the call. After receiving the call, Si Yuan's embarrassment and shyness when she was facing Zhou Yiran just now completely disappeared. Her eyebrows revealed joy again. She used the expression of a girl who adored a boy and shouted to the boy on the phone in front of Zhou Yiran. Hello, is this Senior Zhu Ziho? I'm at home now. Is it a classmate gathering? Is it organized by Senior Zhu Ziho? Go, of course I have time. And I also have something that I want to give to Senior Zhu Ziho alone. Come. Wonderful book house. Chapter 27-29. If it was said that when Si Yuan was talking to Zhou Yiran just now, she had an extremely embarrassed look on her face. At this moment, Si Yuan's expression was bashful, as if she was afraid that she would say something wrong and provoke the other seniors' dissatisfaction. Si Yuan had never shown such a girly expression in front of him before. Senior Zhu Ziho? Zhou Yiran's face gradually darkened under Si Yuan's unconscious state. He remembered that this was the person who asked his Yuan to write a love letter to? He had only left for 9 months. She already had someone else she liked so quickly? Si Yuan was still speaking shyly to the senior on the other end of the phone. At this moment, Zhou Yiran snatched the phone that Si Yuan was still talking to. His face was indifferent the entire time. He used an indifferent tone to speak to the senior who was still talking to Si Yuan. Is this Yuan senior? Your call seriously affected my fun with Yuan. In the future, don't call Yuan when I'm in bed with Yuan. Zhou Yiran said this string of lies without blushing or skipping a beat. As soon as he finished speaking, Zhou Yiran hung up the phone without even giving the other senior time to reply. He blacklisted the other senior's number with one hand and threw Si Yuan's phone on the dressing table in the distance. Si Yuan took a long time to react. She was stunned. When she realized what Zhou Yiran had said and done, her face instantly turned pale. She looked at Zhou Yiran and called out his name. Zhou Yiran, what are you doing? You're unreasonable. I don't want to see you anymore. Get out of my room. Immediately. Si Yuan was so angry that her eyes were wet. She pointed at the door and said angrily to Zhou Yiran. Have you forgotten Yuan? You accepted my flowers when you were young and agreed to be my bride. Zhou Yiran smiled wickedly and walked toward Si Yuan. Zhou Yiran's wickedness combined with his handsome features gave people a terrifying feeling no matter how they looked at it. Si Yuan grabbed the blanket and pursed her lips. After hearing Zhou Yiran's words, she turned her head to the side and acted shamelessly. Did I say that? Just as Si Yuan finished speaking, Zhou Yiran suddenly stepped forward and grabbed Si Yuan's chin. He leaned forward, grabbed her red lips and pressed his lips against hers. The moment she was suddenly kissed, Si Yuan had an indescribable feeling. She had always treated Zhou Yiran as her brother, just like brother Si Rua. But he actually, and she seemed to, like this feeling. What's wrong with her? Silly girl, you don't even know how to close your eyes. Zhou Yiran saw that Si Yuan was almost suffocated by his kiss. He smiled and let go of her. With his hands in his pockets, Zhou Yiran stared fixedly at Si Yuan. Finally, a meaningful arc appeared on his face. Silly girl, you can't run away. I have to marry you. As for Senior Zhu Ziho, if one came he would kill one. If two came he would kill two. His Yuan could only be his. Big brother Iran, don't show that kind of expression. I'm scared. Si Yuan looked at Zhou Yiran's devilishly charming expression, as though he was holding her in his hands. She shivered. The next second she was pulled into Zhou Yiran's embrace. Don't be afraid. There's something that will make you even more afraid in the future. That thing will make you pregnant and make you his woman forever, his little Yuan. Already, I can't wait to make you my woman. Come. Wonderful book house. Chapter 2730. In another time and space. After Yun Jian and Si Yi died together with the mysterious man Shuang Lin Wei, Adam Mo Sen, and the others all died in that battle. Just 3 years after the war in early 2019, Si Dan, Zhou Yiran and Yuan Jin were drinking in a bar. At that time Yuan Jin was not called Yuan Jin. Yuan Jin did not have a real name. His parents always called him Lingling. Later, in the battle in 2016, Shuang and Si Luo died. Yuan Jin gave himself a name, Yuan Jin. The three of them got drunk in the bar. When they left the bar, they suddenly saw a black shadow. Originally this was not a strange thing. However, the black shadow was dressed exactly the same as the mysterious man. The year 2019 was 3 years since the mysterious man had perished together with Yun Jian and the others. The mysterious man had died long ago. How could he still be alive? Therefore the three of them followed him. Although they lost the mysterious man, they found the spacetime gate in the spacetime forest. Now, no matter how stupid they were, they could guess that the mysterious man was from the future world. In that case their parents could still be saved. Are you sure? If we go back to the past to change history and fail, even we will die, not to mention Yuan, Yuan Jin said to Si Dan. This discovery might be able to change history, but they only had one chance. If they failed, not only would they not be able to save the people they lost, but they might even die. It's been 3 years. Are you happy? Si Dan only said this sentence. After that, the three of them fell silent. Zhou Yiran, I leave Yuan to you. Yuan Jin and I will go back. If we die, you must protect Yuan. Otherwise, I will not let you go even if I become a ghost. Si Dan said seriously to Zhou Yiran. This year, Si Dan, Zhou Yiran and Yuan Jin were all in their 20s. I promise with my life. Zhou Yiran said firmly. After making the decision, Si Dan and Yuan Jin walked into the space-time gate. The two of them could not bear the impact of the gate. Fortunately, they still had the spiritual power taught by Yun Jian and Si Yi, so they did not die. However, when they exited the space-time gate, Si Dan and Yuan Xing were separated. Si Shan was directly smashed out of the space-time gate, falling from a height of 1,000 meters and landing in an unknown place on an unknown continent. Unable to withstand the strong impact, he finally closed his eyes and fainted. It was unknown how long he had been unconscious for. There seemed to be a female singing voice in his mind. The voice was like the chirping of an oriole, giving people a fresh and refined feeling. The voice was very pleasant to listen to. It was a 16 or 17-year-old girl who was passing by. When the young girl saw Si Ming lying in the stream, she was so scared that she hurried over and wanted to help Si Ming up. What happened to you? Are you okay? But Sven had already fainted. The young girl gritted her teeth and finally went to call for help. When Siwon woke up, he saw the girl trying to wipe the sweat off his body. He struggled to get up, but he felt as if his entire body had been crushed by a tire. The pain was unbearable. Don't get up, you're covered in wounds from head to toe, you'll split open. Hurry up and lie down. The young girl quickly put down the towel that she had used to wipe his body and helped him lie down. Seeing this, Siwon's deep eyes glanced at the girl. He asked, "You are?" "My name is Kai Tang, I'm from this village." When I saw you lying on the ground, I was worried that something would happen to you, so I brought you back in a hurry. Just now, I've already asked an immortal cultivator with medical skills to treat your injuries. He said that you'll recover after a day of rest. Lie down and don't move, I'll change the water for you and wipe your body. This will heal you faster. The young girl was very delicate, and her big eyes seemed to be able to speak. She looked at Dan, and after saying this, she stood up and smiled at him. Then she walked out with a slightly shy face. If you want to talk about Campus Rebirth, the strongest female secret agent, with more like-minded people, follow excellent reading literature on WeChat. Talk about life, find a confidant. Chapter 2731. Kai Tang was the kind of girl who looked like a child. She was very young, only 17 years old, but she had the face of a 15 or 16-year-old girl. That pair of black eyes was like a talking parrot, giving people a feeling that she was full of vigor and vitality. After Kai Tang left the house with the wooden basin, Si Luo began to look around. This was a very old house, similar to a wooden house in ancient times, as if it could collapse at any time. The house was very simple. Other than a bed, a stool, and some girls' daily necessities, there was nothing else. But Si Luo smiled. From the moment he woke up, Si Luo knew that he had succeeded. He had succeeded in coming from the year 2019 to the millions of continents where everything had yet to begin. Are you hungry? I've cooked some porridge for you. Just then Kai Tang, who had just left with the wooden basin, came back with a bowl of porridge. She looked at Si Luo and smiled sweetly. Si Luo replied softly. Kai Tang then brought the porridge to Si Luo. Oh right, do you have a name? Kai Tang helped Si Luo up from the bed and suddenly had an idea, so she asked suddenly. Si Luo's eyes darkened at the question. Well, if you don't want to say it, then forget it. Kai Tang saw that Si Luo did not reply for a long time, so she bit her tongue. Xingfeng. Just when Kai Tang thought that he would not speak, Si Luo suddenly spoke. Nice name. Kai Tang smiled at Si Luo, then stood up and walked out. Then you eat the porridge first, I'll go out for a while. He had been here for a month and Kai Tang had been taking care of him. Si Luo's body had almost recovered. During this time, Si Luo finally understood that he was in a place called the Desolate Spirit Continent among the millions of continents. The Desolate Spirit Continent was among the millions of continents, just like the Yulong continent that did not have the sorcerer god. It was the lowest continent among the millions of continents. It was a place so low that women were defiled by people from other continents, but they did not dare to voice their anger. Si Luo did not forget his business. While he was recuperating, he asked Kai Tang to help him find Yuan Jin's whereabouts, but it was to no avail. So he decided to leave. You're leaving early tomorrow morning? The village chief of Kai Tang's village was very surprised to hear that Si Wen was leaving. Yes, thank you for your help these days. I will definitely visit you to express my gratitude. Si Dan cupped his hands towards Kai Tang, the villagers who had helped him, and the village chief. The village head didn't respond to Si Xian, but he gave Kai Tang a look. What the village chief and Kai Tang didn't know was that the look he gave Kai Tang had already fallen into Si Wan's eyes. At night, Si Ming was sleeping on the bed. The paper covering the window was suddenly pierced by someone. Si Dan's eyes narrowed, but he didn't move from the bed. After a while, a cloud of sleeping gas was blown into the room. The amount of smoke was enough to knock out a powerful cultivator. Sven did not move and pretended to be knocked out. Yun Jian and Si had fed Si Wan all kinds of poisons and drugs since he was young, so he was immune to all kinds of poisons. After a long time, the sound of crying suddenly came from outside the house. Sven gently turned over and quietly approached the door. In the end, he just leaned against the door and listened to the sound coming from outside. From the sound of it, it was the village chief's voice. And the target of the village chief's scolding was none other than Kai Tang. Nonsense. You'll be 18 in a month. If you're not married when you're 18, you'll definitely be taken to the Flame Barren Land. Do you know what kind of place the Flame Barren Land is? All the prisoners from thousands of continents are imprisoned there. There are more than 10,000 people there. The young girls thrown there can be raped by the 10,000 prisoners in the Flame Barren Land at any time. Do you think you can handle so many men in the Flame Barren Land where women are rare? Not to mention 10,000, even 100 of them will take your life. That sleeping gas still has some aphrodisiac in it. As long as you immediately go in and do the deed with that man, you don't have to be afraid that he won't marry you. Do it with one person, or be touched by 10,000 men at any time. It's up to you. Chapter 2732. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Kai Tang exclaimed, "Why are you here?" Page 1/1. Although the village chief's words were sharp, they were also heavy. The village chief did not want Kai Tang to do such a thing. Kai Tang was just an ordinary village girl. However, she did not have a choice in this matter. After criticizing Kai Tang with a harsh tone, the village chief regretted it immediately. Sigh. The village head sighed heavily. He looked at Kai Tang, who had already burst into tears in front of him, and pressed his forehead. The desolate spirit continent was the lowest level continent among the thousands of continents. It was so low that the experts from other continents could slander it as they wished. In this world where strength was respected, regardless of gender, as long as one had strength, anyone could be a king. Because this village in the desolate spirit continent was small and weak, there was an unwritten rule since the beginning of the continent. Any girl in this village who was still a virgin at the age of 18 would be captured and sent to a place where prisoners from thousands of continents were locked up, the Land of Flame. They would become the playthings of tens of thousands of men in the Land of Flame. To put it bluntly, they were like military prostitutes. However, in this village, because there had never been an expert who could protect the village, such an unfair and ridiculous rule was forced to be set since the beginning of the continent. Kai Tang was about to turn 18. She had to find a man, get married, and lose her virginity before she turned 18. Suddenly, the manager of the Land of Flame would send an old woman to check if Kai Tang was still a virgin at the age of 18 and if she was already married. Because of such a system, the people in this village were not willing to have daughters. Even if they had daughters, some would use their connections to send them far away. The men in this village were too weak. In this world where the strong were respected, they were often killed because they could not defeat the other party. Therefore, in Kai Tang's village there were almost no men of Kai Tang's age. Even if there were, they would have already married. At first, it was a coincidence that Kai Tang saved Si Rui. However, it was less than a month before Kai Tang turned 18. If they still could not find her, Kai Tang would really be sent to the Land of Flame. The village chief had no choice but to do this. "Village chief, I really can't, please let him go. I will think of a way, I will definitely think of a way when the time comes." Standing in front of the village chief, Kai Tang's small face revealed endless pain. She pleaded with the village chief, her face pale. "Ah, forget it. Little girl Kai Tang, don't regret it." The village chief sighed fiercely, flicked his sleeves, and turned to leave. Under the moonlight, through the paper window, Si-Wan saw Kai Tang wiping away her tears, patting her pink and tender cheeks, grabbing the flesh around her mouth, forcing a smile, and then turning around and running away. Si-Ming stood inside the cabin and looked around. A few seconds later, he left the cabin and followed Kai Tang's footsteps without being discovered. She saw Kai Tang come to the side of a stream. She squatted down and the forced smile just now disappeared. Her tears suddenly gushed out like water. She squatted down and cried loudly. It was very quiet here and there was no one around. Si-Ming was about to leave. Who knew that Kai Tang suddenly tripped on a stone and fell into the stream? Si Rui instinctively appeared and stretched out a hand to wrap around Kai Tang's slender waist. The sudden appearance of Si Rui scared Kai Tang. She looked at Si Rui in panic and exclaimed, "Xingfeng Yu, why are you here?" Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 2733. I followed you here. Silan just looked down at Kai Tang and said, "He didn't have so many things to do. He came here for an important mission. A person like him might not even have a future. He would definitely leave this place." After saying this, Silan let go of Kai Tang, turned around and walked back. "Do you know everything?" Kai Tang was not stupid. The moment Si Dan took 2 steps back, she asked. After asking this question, Kai Tang smiled again. She wiped away her tears and solemnly said to Si Wan, who was walking forward without looking back at her, "Don't worry, I won't let you get involved in this matter in our village. When you leave tomorrow, leave from the east gate of the village. Remember, don't say goodbye and don't look for the village chief or the villagers. Otherwise they won't let you go." The people in Kai Tang's village were basically very united. Kai Tang was about to turn 18. Originally, the people in the village were still struggling to find a man to marry Kai Tang. Now that Silan sent himself to the door, the people in the village naturally wouldn't let Silan leave easily. Even if the village chief didn't care about this matter, the villagers definitely wouldn't let Silan leave empty-handed like when he came. Kai Tang's words were equivalent to letting Silan go directly. Silan, who was walking in front, stopped in his tracks, but he didn't say anything and walked forward again. The next morning, Sealan's house was empty. Kai Tang knew that he must have taken advantage of the fact that the sky was still dark to leave. Although he was a little disappointed in his heart, this was also a reasonable thing. After tidying up the house where Sealan slept, Kai Tang just walked out of the door and the house was surrounded by the villagers in the village. Kai Tang, tell uncle, where did that kid go? You saved this person. What's wrong with marrying you to repay your kindness? Come out quickly. A group of villagers gathered here. If Sealan was still here, he would definitely be blocked and couldn't get out. Kai Tang breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he was gone. He's gone. I let him go. I know uncles and aunts are doing this for my good. I'm really touched, but we can't force him like this. We have no right to ask anyone to repay our kindness. Kai Tang bowed deeply to the crowd in front of her. This group of uncles and aunts who had gathered here for Kai Tang all secretly wiped away their tears. How could such a well-behaved child be born in their village? And they were forced to endure all of this. Kai Tang. At this moment, the village chief appeared. After the village chief appeared, he first sighed and then said to Kai Tang, Zhang Lu from the neighboring village is a good man with great strength. Although you will be his 17th concubine after marrying him, but, just as the village chief finished speaking, the villagers suddenly saw a handsome man walking out from behind the wooden house and cried out in alarm. Xixian. This brat didn't leave. Just when everyone was surprised that Si Jin had actually returned, Kai Tang also couldn't believe that Si Jin was carrying a living thing in front of everyone. Si Dan suddenly threw the living creature in his hand, a small demon beast that was very valuable in the Xiuxian continent, in front of everyone. The villagers had never seen such a magical beast before. One must know that in the village, no one had the ability to capture such a small demon beast. At the moment when everyone was looking at this small demon beast in surprise, Si Xian suddenly spoke in front of everyone present. I've just arrived here and have no money. This is the betrothal gift. You can arrange the marriage at any time. Chapter 2734. You really came back. Kai Tang was stunned. Her little face was full of shock and disbelief. Didn't you already leave? Kai Tang looked at Si Ro in surprise and asked, Didn't you already leave? While the people around were looking at the little magical beast in surprise, Kai Tang looked at Si Ro with a trace of emotion and asked, Who said that? Si Ming raised his eyebrows and looked at Kai Tang. After that, Si Luo kicked the little magical beast that was curled up on the ground. It was originally fierce and brutal, but now it was as obedient as a mouse in front of Si Luo. He looked at Kai Tang and said, I just went to catch this beast. Si Luo's words touched Kai Tang's heart. Ah! Young man, you can actually defeat a magical beast. The village chief walked to the little magical beast, looked at it and stared at Si Luo with a stunned expression. While laughing, the village head lost his smile. He suddenly wiped away his tears and bowed deeply to Si Dan. Young man, I apologize for what I did to you before. Kai Tang has no parents since she was a child. I brought her up single-handedly. Now I give her to you. I hope you can treat her well. She is a good child. Please. The village chief's action made Kai Tang burst into tears instantly. I will. The village chief's words were in return for Si Luo's affirmation. Since he planned to marry her, he naturally would not let her down. Because Kai Tang's 18th birthday was coming, the village hurriedly held a wedding for Kai Tang and Si Luo the next night. Although it was very simple, and even to Si Wan, who had seen a lot of things in 2019, it was a wedding banquet that he didn't even care about. However, he felt particularly warm. Yun Jian and Si Yi died together in the battle with the mysterious man in 2016. Si Luo had suffered too much in the past 3 years. Today, in such a small village, he felt warmth again. This was also the reason why Si Luo was willing to marry Kai Tang. The wedding was held very late. The villagers in the village were very noisy. They stopped at midnight and went home. Si Luo walked into the wedding room. Kai Tang was still sitting on the bed at this time. But from Kai Tang's action of clenching the handkerchief in her hand, it could be seen how scared Kai Tang was at this moment and what would happen next. In fact, Si Luo had never done anything between a man and a woman. But in this regard, men were born beasts. When Si Dan walked in front of Kai Tang sat on the side, feeling a little uncomfortable. In the end, Kai Tang and Si Luan had only known each other for a little more than a month. He was still considered a stranger. But now she was going to marry a man who was still considered a stranger, and she didn't even know where he came from, and do the most intimate thing. There was still an unspeakable panic and fear in Kai Tang's heart. When Si Dan reached out to pull off Kai Tang's clothes, Kai Tang clutched her clothes tightly. Her small cheeks were red as if she had eaten chili. It was tempting. Can I not take off my clothes? I'm scared. Kai Tang stammered out the last 3 words in a voice that sounded like the chirping of a mosquito. Okay. Sven didn't force her. He took the initiative and reached out to pull Kai Tang's pants. At first, Kai Tang clamped her pants tightly, refusing to let Sven take them off. It was instinctive. Finally, Kai Tang, whose pants were torn off, hid her face in the quilt, not daring to look at Si Tua. For some reason, when he saw Kai Tang's frightened appearance, it reminded him of Zhou Yuran, that abominable and hateful man. Thinking of this, Si Dan had already grabbed Kai Tang's slender waist and fiercely entered. Ah! It hurts. Chapter 2735. The night was very quiet. The chirping of cicadas and the chirping of insects mixed together, adding some color to the moonlit night. Inside the wooden house there was a charming moment. At night the stars were densely packed. When the world inside the wooden house quieted down, the 2 twinkling stars in the sky collided with each other, emitting a twinkling light. Kai Tang, who was in Si Dan's arms, was still unable to react. She was actually married and had become a real woman. The silence lasted for a long time, so long that Kai Tang thought Si Dan had fallen asleep. She felt that her body was sticky. Perhaps it was because the 2 of them had just done something indescribable not too long ago. Moving her body, Kai Tang wanted to quietly pull away Si Wen's hand that was wrapped around her slender waist and sneak out to take a shower. Suddenly she heard a male voice above her head. Sleep. Kai Tang's breath tightened. She thought he had fallen asleep. After secretly heaving a sigh of relief, Kai Tang gently turned her body and fell asleep. The next morning, Kai Tang had just gotten up when she saw Si Dan sitting at the end of the bed. When she thought of what happened last night, she blushed shyly. Just as she was about to speak, she suddenly heard Si Ming sitting at the end of the bed speak. You're safe in the village. Live well in the future. After saying that, he stood up. If one day I can come back safely, I'll take you away. Si Dan's face was still indifferent. He did have some feelings for Kai Tang. After all, the 2 of them had only known each other for about a month. But feelings could be cultivated. But he couldn't take her away now. He still had a heavy responsibility. He didn't dare to forget for a moment the purpose of coming here. You're leaving? Kai Tang heard Si Dan's words and stood up straight, her beautiful eyes wide open. If you're leaving, can you take me with you? Kai Tang didn't wait for Si Dan to speak and asked. No. Si Ming frowned and decisively refused. What? I can wash clothes for you. I can be very obedient. Don't abandon me, okay? Kai Tang thought Si Dan was going to leave, so she blinked and was a little scared. I won't abandon you. I Xingfeng will never let you down. But if you go with me, you might lose your life at any time. You might live in fear every day, or you might never return to the village. That's why I can't take you away. Sven said to Kai Tang in a solemn tone. He thought that Kai Tang would be scared after hearing these words. I'm not afraid. Kai Tang's big eyes flashed with a confident light. She very calmly blurted out these words. Kai Tang was afraid that Xingfeng wouldn't believe her, so she continued. I'm already married to you, so I'm yours. Indeed, I don't know about your past, but I'm willing to understand you. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of death. Even if there's any danger, I'll go through it with you. The girl's words were filled with an irresistible firmness. Si Xian's heart skipped a beat. It had to be said that Kai Tang's words just now had moved Si Wan's heart. But he still replied, but I'm scared. After saying this, Si Ming moved closer to Kai Tang. He lowered his head and looked at Kai Tang. After 2 seconds of silence, he suddenly said, I'm afraid that you'll die because of me. I don't want to see any more sacrifices. Do you understand? Be good and wait here for me to come back. I swear to you I'll definitely come back. You'll be my wife for life, the one and only. Chapter 2736. Kai Tang was not a difficult person to deal with. After hearing Si Dan's words, she was silent for 2 seconds. Suddenly she nodded. Yes. Then I'll wait for you to come back. It was such a simple sentence, but it became Si Dan's burden. In the end, Si Wan left on his own. However, now that he had someone to care about in this little village and had run into Yuan Jin, he cherished his life even more than before. In this era, the thousands of continents were still in conflict with no master. The domination of the gods' continent had yet to begin. Si Dan brought Yuan Xing and killed his way into the gods' continent. He killed many strong people and fought for supremacy. 3 years later, the first ruler of the God's continent was born. And this first ruler was none other than Si Dan. If not for Yuan Xing's help and his concern for Kai Tang, Si Dan would not have been able to hold on many times. However, he managed to hold on in the end. On this day 3 years later, Si Dan had a stable force in the God's continent. He also built the Temple of the God's continent. The God's continent had been a place that the cultivators of the thousands of continents revered and looked up to since ancient times. From then on, the God's continent was the goal that the cultivators of the thousands of continents fought for. However, later on, the God's continent encountered a great disaster and completely disappeared from the thousands of continents. Later on, the God's continent became a mythical place among the thousands of continents. No one knew if it really existed. It was just like how the people of Country Z thought that gods were just mythical characters. In the village. This is the place? Yuan Xing stood behind Xing Feng and asked Si Dan. Yes. Si Dan nodded. After a pause, he walked forward and said to Yuan Xing, let's go. When Yuan Xing first heard that Si Dan had married a wife when he first came here, he was shocked. However, Yuan Xing never showed his emotions on his face. In this era, Yuan Xing did not wear a ghost mask. The two handsome men walked in the village and attracted the attention of many villagers. After leaving for 3 years, Si Dan became more mature. Hence, most of the villagers did not recognize him at first sight. When they arrived at the village, they saw the usual wooden house. Si Dan walked in. Si Dan and Yuan Xing looked left and right for a while but did not find any trace of anyone. Si Dan's eyebrows slightly sank. Mother, I already know how to recite it. The 111th law of the desolate spirit continent, residents must abide by the law. If you want to learn spiritual power, you must. Suddenly, a child's voice came from the door. The voice was catchy, and the words carried a childish tone. When he first heard the child's voice, Si Dan's expression changed slightly. Yuan Xing also moved his eyes and followed Si Dan out of the room. When Shi came out of the house and saw Kai Tang, who he hadn't seen for 3 years, still full of youthful charm, walking in with a 3-year-old child from outside the courtyard, he was stunned. Kai Tang was holding the hand of a 3-year-old child who was reciting ancient poems. The moment she walked in from outside the courtyard and met Si Dan's eyes, she was also stunned. After not seeing her for 2 years, Kai Tang had become more mature and feminine. Without the innocence of a young girl, although Kai Tang was dressed plainly, it could not cover her beautiful and attractive figure and beautiful delicate face. What attracted Si Dan's attention the most was the 3-year-old child who raised his big eyes and stopped reciting the catchy poem. He glanced left and right and finally stared at Si Dan. As for the 3-year-old child who was being held by Kai Tang, he actually looked exactly like Si Luan. P.S. I don't have much inspiration, so I want to write less. In addition, tomorrow is the 9th, I want to take a day off, so I won't update for the time being. Because I have to take a bus home on the 9th, it should be very late when I get home. I'm afraid I'm not in a good mood, so I won't update. Sob, I'll update on the 10th. In addition, I will write about the male and female leads in May or June. After writing about these important supporting couples, other couples will be mentioned in addition to the male and female leads. If you have any suggestions, please add me on QQ and tell me. Q number 2625702229. Chapter 2737. Mother, there are 2 strange uncles standing in front of our house. Who are they? The little boy who was being held by Kai Tang blinked his big eyes, looked up at Kai Tang and asked loudly. Kai Tang's eyes were wet from the question. She thought that after Si Tuan left, he would not come back. After Si Tuan left, even the villagers thought that he would not come back. When he married her, perhaps it was just a favor to repay her for saving his life. After Si Tuan left, the village chief advised Kai Tang that if she met a good man in the future, she should remarry. But Kai Tang was not willing. Who knew that after 2 months, Kai Tang would find out that she was pregnant? She had been waiting for him and had never thought of anything else. Mother. Standing beside Kai Tang, the child whose height did not even reach Kai Tang's knees, but his little hand was raised high. He pulled the corner of Kai Tang's clothes and shook it, attracting Kai Tang's attention. Kai Tang, who had recovered from her memories, was startled. She reached out and grabbed the child's hand, watching Si Tuan and Yuan Xing walk over. You. Kai Tang wanted to say something. Strange uncle. The 3-year-old boy pulled Kai Tang's hand and stepped back. With a hateful expression, he looked at Si Dan and Yuan Xing who were walking towards them. Could this be your son? Yuan Xing was silent for 2 seconds and also reacted from his shock. His rarely shocked face showed a different color. But Si Tuan ignored Yuan Xing's shock and walked towards Kai Tang. Kai Tang did not step back. Instead, the 3-year-old boy pulled Kai Tang and stepped back. He looked at Si Tuan like a tiger watching its prey. "Strange uncle, you are not allowed to bully my mother." As soon as he said this, Si Tuan picked him up like how Si lifted him in the air when he was a child. "I am your father." Si Tuan picked up the 3-year-old boy and said word by word. After listening to Si Dan's words, the child suddenly burst into tears with a wah. Seeing this, Kai Tang was so scared that she took the child from Si Tuan. She pursed her lips and glanced at Si Tuan. After all, they hadn't seen each other for 3 years, so they were still somewhat unfamiliar with each other. Si Wan naturally felt Kai Tang's actions and his eyes deepened. "What's his name?" Seeing Kai Tang protecting the child like a treasure in front of him, Si Wan's heart tightened. "Kai Liang." Kai Tang carefully raised her head and glanced at Si Dan. She bit her lips and said, "Not good." Si Wan suddenly interjected after Kai Tang's words. Just as he finished speaking, Si Bai added, "From now on, he will be called Si Zua." Kai Tang listened to Si Wan's words and nodded, but she didn't go to Si Wan. "Wah, strange uncle not only bullied mother but also changed Liang Liang's name, wah 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 wah." After hearing Si Shue's words, the 3-year-old began to cry like a porcelain doll again. Yuan Xing stood at the side and grinned. This child's personality was not at all like Si Rue or his maternal grandparents, Yun Jian and Si Yi. The child's cries were met with a headshot from Sven. Finally, the child bit his lips like a bullied little girl, daring to be angry but not daring to say anything. 10 minutes later, the child who changed his name to Sizwa was playing happily with Yuan Xing. Si Tuan took advantage of this gap to pull Kai Tang's hand and walked into the wooden house. As soon as they entered Kai Tang's house, Si Tuan embraced Kai Tang. At this time, Kai Tang hugged Si Tuan's neck. This action greatly stimulated Si Tuan. Si Tuan pressed Kai Tang's butt and lifted her onto the newly added desk in the house. Like a bandit robbing a civilian girl, he quickly took off Kai Tang's pants, bent Kai Tang's beautiful legs, and sank deep into Kai Tang's scream. "Come. Wonderful book house." Chapter 2738. Page 1/1. Outside the house, it started drizzling. After a while, the raindrops became bigger and bigger and the rain became heavier. Inside the house, after the two of them hugged each other, Kai Tang cried out in surprise. Si Ming maintained this posture and did not move. Kai Tang also used her small arms to hug Si Ming's sturdy chest. Tears flowed down her face without any gaps. They maintained this posture. "I thought you wouldn't come back." Her face was full of tears. "Silly, these 4 years you've worked hard. I will never let go of your hand." Si Ming hugged Kai Tang's small body and let her bury her head in his chest. Just when the two of them were tightly connected and everything was about to start. "It's raining. Mother said we can't play in the rain, we'll catch a cold. Come, let's go play with mother." At this time, Xiaoliang Liang's voice suddenly came from outside the house. Xiaoliang Liang was Si Ming and Kai Tang's child. Xiaoliang Liang's name was changed to Sizwa by Si Ming. Kai Liang was the name given to Xiaoliang Liang by Kai Tang. Since his name was changed to Sizwa, then Xiaoliang Liang became his nickname. Mother, open the door. I'll bring uncle to play with you." Xiaoliang Liang led Yuan Xan to the house where Kai Tang and Si Ming were and knocked on the door. At this time, Kai Tang and Si Ming were hugging each other, but they were hugging each other in a shy posture. At the same time, Kai Tang's face flushed bright red. She pushed Si Ming. At this moment, if Kai Tang became Yun Jian and Si Ming became Si Yi, then even if the emperor came, Si Yi would still continue to do it. Although Si Ming's personality was very similar to Si Yi, they were not the same person. He withdrew from Kai Tang's body. The two of them tidied up their clothes. Kai Tang was afraid of being seen through, so she ran to the window and opened it. She used her cold hands to hold her cheeks and then went to open the door. The moment the door was opened, Xiaoliang Liang was like a happy cat as he pounced on Kai Tang. "Mother, I was playing games with uncle just now. Uncle is so smart and powerful." Little Liang Liang suddenly stopped talking. The next moment, Xiaoliang Liang saw Si Dan standing in his mother's room. Although little Liang Liang was only 3 years old, his cheeks changed color in an instant. The next second, little Liang Liang glared at Si Xian fiercely and grinned at him. Bad uncle. Why are you in Yang Qing's room?" The village head's great-grandfather said that no other man could enter except for father. Bad uncle. Xiaoliang Liang was still young and had not realized that he looked very similar to Si Ming. He also did not realize his relationship with Si Ming. Little Liang Liang glared at Si Dan fiercely while struggling to get out of Kai Tang's arms. Then, the little figure rushed in front of Si Dan and slapped Si Dan with one hand while pulling Si Dan's hand with the other, wanting to drag Si Dan out of the room. Little Liang Liang did not have the company of his father since he was young. Because of his desire, when he saw Si Dan in Kai Tang's house, he rushed over to beat him up. Only his father could enter his mother's room. All the men who wanted to enter his mother's room were bad guys. "I'll beat you to death. I'll beat you to death. Bad uncle. Bad uncle." Little Liang Liang said while pulling Si Dan. He tugged at Si Dan's hand. As he tugged and tugged, something called tears flowed out of little Liang Liang's eyes. At this moment, Kai Tang was the first to react. She hurriedly walked over and pulled little Liang Liang's hand away from Si Dan. She carried little Liang Liang and said to little Liang Liang, "He's your father. Liang Liang, didn't you always miss your father? He's your biological father." Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 2739. Although Xiao Liang was still a child, he was surprisingly intelligent. It was probably because of the tradition of the Si family. Children usually needed to hear direct words before they could understand the root of a matter. If you tried to communicate with a child in a roundabout way, not only would the other party not understand, they might even push you away impatiently. However, if you directly said that you wanted to buy lollipops for him, the other party might just reach out his hands and ask for a hug. Si Dan had only said to Xiao Liang, "I'm your father." The child did not know who his father was. Now that Kai Tang directly said that Si Dan was his father, Xiao Liang understood. All his anger was thrown to the back of his mind when he found out that Si Dan was his father. Xiao Liang looked at Si Dan just like that, again and again, again and again. Finally, Xiao Liang looked at Si Dan and asked carefully, "Are you really my father?" Si Dan answered softly. "Are you really my father?" Xiao Liang asked again as if he did not believe it. Si Dan was not annoyed. "I have a father, I really have a father." Wah. Sob sob sob. Daddy hug hug. Xiao Liang threw himself into Si Dan's arms. Si Dan's heart was touched, but he also hugged Xiao Liang. Yuan Xing consciously walked out of the house and let the family of three reunite. When Kai Tang saw this, she covered her mouth, so touched that she could not speak. Although the people of the myriad continents all cultivated, just like on Earth, the children here also needed to go to school. However, the children did not learn Chinese, mathematics, English and so on like on Earth. The children of the myriad continents learned spiritual power and the path of cultivation. Here, whoever had the best grasp of spiritual power would be the best student. Xiao Liang had a full day of lessons in school today, and he was brimming with energy. La 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 la. After school, Xiao Liang shook his head and walked back home. The children of the myriad continents had to go to school when they were 2 years old. This was because 2-year-old children were the best time to awaken their spiritual roots. If they were older, they might not even be able to awaken their spiritual roots, and thus be unable to circulate their spiritual energy and become an immortal cultivator. If he wasn't an immortal cultivator, then he would be an ordinary person with a short lifespan of several decades. Xiao Liang skipped and walked in the direction of home. As soon as he walked out of the classroom, he saw Kai Tang. "Mother. Mother." Little Liang stretched out his hands and pounced over. Kai Tang smiled and carried Xiao Liang. A few children who were 3 or 4 years older than Xiao Liang walked past. The schools here were divided into classes according to the strength of their spiritual power. Although little Liang was only 3 years old, his strength was already comparable to a 6 or 7-year-old child. Therefore the children in his class were all much older than little Liang. "Kai Liang, didn't you say that your father came back and named you Sizhua? Where's your father?" One of the children who passed by asked little Liang. After asking, another child who looked more mischievous added, "He must have missed his father so much that he dreamed about him." After all, Kai Liang also had a dream about his father coming back last time. The group of children giggled. Although little Liang was still young, he could still understand these words. "My father really came back." "Really? Mother, quickly say it." Little Liang tugged at Kai Tang, unwilling to accept this. No matter where it was, whether it was on Earth or the continent, children who didn't have a father since young would always be looked down upon. These children were still giggling. But just as these children were giggling, they seemed to have thought of something and were about to roll on the ground from laughing. These children were suddenly picked up by someone and thrown to the side. When everyone reacted, they saw Si Ming standing in the same place with a dark face. He cast a sidelong glance at the children who were thrown away by him and coldly said, "Who said my son didn't have a father? A bunch of stinky brats, scram." Chapter 2740. Perhaps Si Tuan's expression was too frightening. The group of children who were thrown out by Yuan Xing crawled up from the ground and cried loudly. As if they had seen something horrifying, they all ran away like bees. "Daddy! Daddy! Daddy!" Seeing Si Tuan, little Liang Liang reached out for Si Tuan's hug. She was overjoyed. Si Ming hooked his handsome arc and took little Liang Liang into his arms. Kai Tang stood at the side. She was gratified and happy. She had always known that little Liang Liang wanted her father's company. Now her wish was finally fulfilled. After returning home, Si Ming asked Yuan Xing to return to the God's continent first. Si Tuan had just become the first ruler of the God's continent. In this era, there were countless powerhouses running amok even on the thousands of continents, committing crimes. This was a world without rulers where the strong were respected. To the people of the thousands of continents, the God's continent, which was a legendary place, had even more powerhouses. Si Tuan had just ruled the God's continent. Naturally, countless powerhouses would stand up and express their dissatisfaction. Si Ming asked Yuan Xing to go back first to stabilize the situation. As for him, he had to stay here for a while longer. He planned to bring Kai Tang and little Liang Liang back to the God's continent. When he told Kai Tang and little Liang Liang about his plan to bring them away from the desolate spirit continent, Kai Tang fell silent. Little Liang Liang clapped her hands and said in a daze, "Wherever Daddy goes, I'll go too." Kai Tang had stayed here for so many years after all. There was the village chief who took good care of her. There were villagers who cared for her and loved her. They could already be considered as her family. Now that she had to leave this place where she had grown up, Kai Tang's heart was naturally conflicted. "If you don't want to leave, that's fine too." Si Ming saw Kai Tang's hesitation and was about to speak. "No." Kai Tang shook her head. She paused, then raised her head to look at Si Tuan. She said to him word by word, "Wherever you go, I'll go. I, Kai Tang, will follow you for the rest of my life." Forever and ever she would never leave. Si Dan raised a handsome arc and revealed a smile. The next second, he stretched out his other free hand and hugged Kai Tang into his arms. Then it settled. He would never let go of her hand. Although he had a mission, as long as she was there, he would definitely succeed. Definitely. "How dare you bully my son? Kai, get the hell out here." At this moment, a particularly rough female voice suddenly came from the door. After this woman's voice rang out, a series of curses followed, one after another, endless streams of curses. "Yes, get out here. How dare you bully our child? Do you want to die or what? If you don't come out right now, I'll have my man raise your house to the ground." Angry curses could be heard from outside the house. Hearing these voices, Kai Tang's eyes suddenly moved. Si Ming's eyes flashed. The next second he carried his son, Xiao Liang Liang, and held Kai Tang's hand as they walked out of the door. He saw 5 or 6 children's parents standing at the door. And these 5 or 6 children who were hiding behind their parents were precisely the children who had mocked little Liang Liang at the entrance of the school, and were later thrown out by Si Ming's order. "Mother, it's him. He's the one who bullied us just now." At this moment, a child who was hiding behind his mother pointed at Si Ming. As if he had a backer, he mustered up his courage and spoke loudly. This child's mother was a woman who looked to be in her 40s. She glanced at Si Ming and shouted with her hands on her hips, "You're the one who bullied my son? Do you want to die?" Chapter 2741. When the woman spoke, her tone was high and carried a sense of confidence. Although the parents of the other children were also dignified, they all shrank behind this woman. Needless to say, this woman was quite good-looking. Her name was Ji Tong. Everyone knew that Ji Tong's husband was called Han Shisan. In the desolate spirit continent, he was one of the best in terms of spiritual power. In this world, the deity continent was a mythical world among the thousands of continents. Any deity from the deity continent was an existence that could sweep away everyone. Not to mention the ruler of the deity continent. To the people of the thousands of continents, he was simply a legendary figure who did not even exist. In the thousands of continents, in this world where strength reigned supreme, fists spoke. Whoever's fists were strong enough could obtain respect. Furthermore, if anyone dared to disagree, even if they had reason, they had to bow to the fists. This was the rule of the cultivation world. Ji Tong's husband, Han Shisan, was one of the best in the desolate spirit continent. His strength was astonishing. He had almost become the #1 guard of the desolate spirit continent's king. Unfortunately, he did not seize the opportunity back then. But here, Han Shirsan could be said to be an existence that could do whatever he wanted. When she heard that her son had been left behind, Ji Tong was furious on the spot. She immediately called her husband to support her son. Seeing this scene, Xiao Liangliang was instinctively afraid and shrank into Si Jin's arms. Not long before Si Jin returned, Xiao Liangliang was found at home because he accidentally broke a classmate's things. In the end, Kai Tang hugged Xiao Liangliang and knelt to beg for mercy. Only then was she forgiven. Kai Tang's strength was not bad, but she had a child and was alone. So, in order to protect her child, she was forced to kneel to someone. In the end, her scalp was smashed with something. Fortunately, she was fine. This was the result of a woman raising a child alone in the thousands of continents without a man at home. Ji Tong must have heard of this matter, so she brought the parents of the children and came to find them. Ji Tong's words fell. Seeing that Kai Tang and Si Jin were silent, she thought that Kai Tang and Si Jin were afraid. She rolled her eyes at Si Jin in her heart. She did not expect that Kai Tang's husband, who had not returned for many years, was just a useless guy with a body full of skin. Ji Tong looked at Kai Tang and laughed coldly. Kai Tang, I heard that you offended someone last time. You had to hold your son and kneel to that person. You even had your scalp bruised before you were forgiven. After laughing, she relied on her husband's strength to raise her eyebrows and squint at Kai Tang contemptuously. Take it off. If you strip naked and kneel in front of us today, we can forgive you. The more Ji Tong spoke, the more outrageous he became. Sven's face became darker and darker. Wife, don't talk nonsense with them. As long as you're happy, I'll take off that woman's clothes and make you happy. Ji Tong's husband, Han Shirsan, stared straight at Kai Tang. As he spoke, he moved forward at a speed that was so fast that the parents of the children behind Ji Tong exclaimed in surprise as he approached Kai Tang. Kai Tang's expression suddenly changed. But just as Ji Tong's husband, Han Shirsan, was about to approach Kai Tang, Si Dan suddenly stretched out his hand. Si Dan raised his hand and directly channeled his spiritual power through the air. He lifted Han Shirsan's body into the air in front of everyone present, more than 10 meters above the ground. This. Suddenly seeing this scene, the faces of everyone present suddenly turned pale. Han Shirsan's spiritual power was invincible in this area. But this man, just as everyone was looking at the scene in front of them in horror, Lin Fan's expression changed. Si Dan controlled his spiritual power and turned Han Shirsan 160 degrees upside down in the air so that Han Shirsan's head was facing the ground. Then he did not release the spiritual power in his hand. No! Ji Tong screamed in horror. At this time, Han Shirsan's head had already hit the ground heavily. There was a bloody hole in the top of his head and he died on the spot. At this time, Si Dan covered Xiao Liang's eyes and sneered. He looked at Ji Tong and the group of children's parents standing behind her and sneered in public. Bullying my wife and children, huh? Since you're here, don't even think about escaping. Chapter 2742. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. Si Rua's actions were taught by Yun Jian and Ce. Coupled with his genes, he was more or less influenced by Yun Jian and Ce. However, what was shocking was not Si Rua's words, but Si Rua's strength and methods. Han Shirsan was lifted by Si Rua from the ground and smashed headfirst into the ground, creating a bloody hole. He died on the spot. My husband, I'll kill you. Give me back my husband. When Ji Tong saw her husband die in Si Rua's hands, she rushed towards Si Rua, Kai Tang and Xiao Liangliang as if she had rabies. As she rushed, she screamed and screamed. Wah, wah wah wah, wah wah wah. Ji Tong and Han Shirsan's son, who was standing behind their parents with a smug look on his face, now stood in place and cried loudly. Kai Tang had unknowingly taken Xiao Liangliang from Si Rua's hands. She was also shocked by the horrifying scene just now. She squatted on the ground and let Xiao Liangliang lean on her chest. She put one of Xiao Liangliang's ears on her body and covered them. She covered Xiao Liangliang's eyes and used her other hand to cover the ears that were not covered. Before Ji Tong could reach Si Rua and the other two, Si Rua grabbed her by the throat with one hand and lifted her off the ground. Ji Tong's son was still squatting on the ground and crying. What? Cough. What? Let go. Cough cough cough, I'm going to kill you. Ji Tong, who was being held in the air, did not have any strength to fight back. Her throat was being strangled by an unknown force. Her eyes rolled up and her face turned red from suffocation. Apart from Ji Tong's family, the other children as well as the children's parents, were all scared out of their wits. Kai Tang was a woman who was known to be abandoned by men in the nearby villages. But who knew that the man who abandoned Kai Tang would come back? Looking at the situation, not only did Kai Tang's man come back, he was also an unfathomable strong man. Seeing the scene in front of them, the parents of the children were so shocked that they didn't dare to leave, but they were also shocked and didn't know what to do. Just when the parents of the children were so frightened that they didn't know what to do, a hurried voice suddenly sounded. Stop, 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 stop. Everyone looked to the side, only to see an old man leading a group of people behind him, hurriedly running over. Seeing the old man, the parents of the children heaved a sigh of relief. At the same time, their eyes revealed deep respect for the old man. The desolate spirit continent was divided into 3 regions: Eastern University, Western University, and Central University. This was the Western University, and this old man was the elder in charge of maintaining discipline in the Western University. Even Han Shirsan was no match for this elder's strength. He was considered to be at the top of the pyramid of the desolate spirit continent. Therefore, the appearance of this elder caused everyone to immediately quiet down. Kai Tang was also stunned when she saw the elder. She was afraid that the elder would attack Si Luan, so she hurriedly reached out and pulled Raswan away. She looked at Si Luan and shook her head. If it were someone else, Si Luan wouldn't have cared. Seeing Kai Tang, Si Luan withdrew his hand in a second. Ji Tong fell to the ground like a kite with a broken string. It took him a long time to come to his senses. Elder. He killed my husband. You have to avenge me. After Ji Tong came to his senses, he coughed several times, looked at the elder and spoke loudly, hoping to get the elder's protection. It would be best if Kai Tang's man could pay with his life. But what Kai Tang didn't expect was that after the elder rushed to Si Dan, he directly knelt in front of Si Dan and kowtowed several times. Then, in front of everyone present, he said to Si Dan, "Senior brother, please forgive me. I heard that someone saw you with his own eyes. You are the strong man from the legendary deity continent, aren't you?" Translator, Transin Editor, Transin. Chapter 2743. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1, Deities Continent. It was mentioned earlier. Deities Continent was a legendary place that everyone on the myriad continents recognized as the place where deities lived. If anyone from there appeared, it would cause a huge commotion among the myriad continents. The elder's words were like a bucket of pig's dung poured on Ji Tong and the other children's parents. What? A powerhouse from Deities Continent. One of the children's mother heard the elder's words and was so shocked that her eyes were bigger than a dead fish. The next moment she fell to the ground and fainted. Deities, continent. The father of the child, who had been aggressive just a moment ago, let out a shrill scream. He knelt down in front of Si Ming. Everyone, including the group brought by the elder, knelt down in front of the wooden house and kowtowed to Si Ming, who was standing high above everyone else. In addition to the people brought by the elder, the group of dozens of people knelt down in front of Si Ming. If anyone were to see this scene, it would definitely cause a huge commotion. Kai Tang's entire body froze. She never thought that Si Ming was from Deities Continent. The desolate continent was the lowest level continent among the myriad continents. Any deity from Deities Continent could roam freely in any corner of the myriad continents. No powerhouse on the myriad continents dared to compete with them. The difference between her and him was like heaven and earth. Kai Tang hugged Liang Liang and lowered her head. She did not know if it was because of the intimidating aura or the atmosphere, but just as she was about to kneel down in front of Si Ming like everyone else on the desolate continent, Si Ming reached out a hand and held Kai Tang's hand. He pulled Kai Tang up from the ground and held her in his arms. Little Liang Liang was brought to the middle of Si Wan and Kai Tang, blocking his parents from hugging each other. He struggled uncomfortably and pursed his lips. "She's my wife. This is my son. She has suffered so much in the desolate continent these few years. Today she will pay for it all." Siwan was the same as Yun Jian. She would always seek revenge and repay kindness. Kai Tang and Xiao Liang had suffered a lot in the desolate spirit continent without the company of their husbands and fathers. Hearing Si Dan's words, everyone present was shocked. At this moment, everyone was trying to recall if they had bullied Kai Tang and Xiao Liang before. He had never felt so relaxed before. The faces of those who had done it changed drastically. And Kai Tang, who was being pulled into Si Ming's arms, had already flashed through countless shock in her heart. He was actually a deity of the deity's continent. Little Liang Liang was actually the child of a deity from the deity's continent. Just as Kai Tang woodenly raised her head to look at Si Wen's chiseled chin and delicate facial features, Si Wen suddenly stretched out his bony hand and gently lifted Kai Tang's pink cheeks, letting her pink lips meet his eyes. The more Si Xian looked at Kai Tang's delicate face, the more he loved it. He loved her so much that he couldn't bear to part with her. He wanted to rub her into his bones and stay in her body for the rest of his life, never wanting to leave. Kai Tang's face became pinker under Si Wen's gaze. At this moment, Si Wen lowered his head and kissed Kai Tang's lips fiercely in front of everyone who was kneeling on the ground. He licked the girl's fragrance on his lips and smiled evilly. "Tell me who bullied you. Today your man will send those who bullied you to hell one by one." Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 2744. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Si Ming flirted with Kai Tang in public, page 1/1. Or should I say, let the entire desolate spirit continent be destroyed to wash away their sins? Si Ming's words were enough to decide the fate of the desolate spirit continent. A strong person could decide the life and death of a continent. "No, Kai Tang. I'm begging you. I'm begging you. No. Please persuade your man. We were wrong. We were wrong. Please? Please." A lot of begging voices came from below. In fact, most of them did not do anything to Kai Tang. Except for the person who was forgiven after Kai Tang knelt down last time, most of the people only attacked Kai Tang verbally when they met her in the ordinary times. Other than that, no one had hit Kai Tang. Most of them did not even attack her verbally. Even if it was not for this reason, Kai Tang was still from the desolate spirit continent. Moreover, there was the elder she respected the most, the village chief, and the villagers who treated her very well in her village. Kai Tang shook her head at Si Ming and grabbed his hand. "Don't." Kai Tang's reaction made Si Ming feel no punishment for the group of people kneeling in front of him. He stroked her delicate cheeks and his lips curled up slightly. "Don't you want them to pay the price?" "No." Kai Tang shook her head. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Si Wan reached out and stroked Sai Tang's tender cheek. In front of everyone present he said to Kai Tang, "Little Liang, you're a third wheel with 1,000,000 volts in the middle. But I think they have offended me." If it were not for fear of Si Ming, the revered elder who was kneeling on the ground would have rolled his eyes. At first, the revered elder was shocked by Si Ming's words and broke out in a cold sweat. But looking at Si Ming's expression, it was more like he was coaxing or teasing Kai Tang. Or in other words, even if Kai Tang wanted the sun in the sky, he would forcibly pluck it down and give it to her. The life and death of the desolate spirit continent was now in Kai Tang's hands. Just as the revered elder thought of this, Si Ming caressed Kai Tang's cheeks and blurted out another sentence. Whether it was his tone or his words, they all revealed his strong possessiveness towards Kai Tang. "It's okay to not kill them and not destroy the desolate spirit continent, but how will you compensate me?" Si Wen looked like a very decent person, but the words that came out of his mouth made people shy. But no one could do anything now. Moreover, the women present were all envious of Kai Tang. What kind of luck did she have to be able to marry a deity and become the woman that a deity adored? Those who were frightened by Si Ming were now all heaved a sigh of relief. Ji Tong was so scared that he broke out in a cold sweat. His eyes lost focus and he didn't dare to say another word. Kai Tang took a deep breath and looked at Si Xian with her big eyes. Finally, she gathered her courage and covered the eyes of Liang Liang, who was standing between her and Si Xian. She stood on her tiptoes and took the initiative to kiss Si Xian, who was bending down. Just like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the water, Kai Tang's face had already turned red in front of so many people. Si Ming hooked an arc and licked his thin lips that still had Kai Tang's scent. The people below were all kneeling on the ground. They clearly felt Si Ming's action and caught a glimpse of it, but they didn't dare to raise their heads. Kai Tang now knew that Si Ming was flirting with her in public. She blushed and lowered her head. At the moment when Kai Tang lowered her head, Si Ming bent down and put his thin lips near her ear. In a voice that only the two of them could hear, he said something shameless. "Tang Tang, do you think you can compensate me by kissing me? Tonight, let's try the other new positions in the album. Now, I'll listen to whatever you say." Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 2745. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. Killing this group of people who bullied her or destroying the desolate spirit continent was a piece of cake for Dan. What he was most interested in now was not this group of people who could send them to hell at any time, but his little wife. Lowering his head, he saw Kai Tang's face turn red after listening to his unreasonable request. C1 had a growing urge to continue to tease her. She was so cute that he wanted to hide her in his room and not let her appear in front of others for the rest of his life. Of course, Kai Tang did not know about Dan's thoughts. When she heard Dan's words, she frowned tightly, like a little magpie who was panicked and scared after being targeted by a hunter. This made Dan love her even more. "Mother, what is the new position Uncle was talking about?" Just when the group of people who were kneeling down heaved a sigh of relief, Xiao Liang suddenly looked up at Dan, then blinked his big eyes and looked at Kai Tang. Siwen had whispered those words in Kai Tang's ear, so there shouldn't be a second person on the scene who heard it, including Xiao Liang, who knew that Xiao Liang's hearing was so amazing that he actually heard what Dan said to Kai Tang. Kai Tang's cheeks, which were already rosy, instantly turned red. The group of people who were kneeling down naturally heard it clearly, but no one dared to say anything. "Call me Daddy." Dan knocked Xiao Liang's head with a chestnut. "Oh whoa!" Xiao Liang cried out softly, then he looked up and glared at Dan. "No. Unless Uncle doesn't bully my mother." Xiao Liang had already memorized the word, Daddy, in his heart. However, as a 3-year-old child, he should have his own pride. In the end, Kai Tang shook Dan's arm and shyly acquiesced to his request. Dan did not care about the people below. But in the near future, those who had bullied Kai Tang, including the parents of those children, Ji Tong and Ji Tong's children. Dan ordered Yuan Lin to send people to eliminate them all. This was what Yun Jian taught him. If you don't remove the roots when you cut the weeds, they will grow again when the spring breeze blows. Since he wanted to be the king of a region, he couldn't let go of anyone who was dissatisfied with him but didn't have the strength to resist. This kind of person was like a ferocious tiger hiding in the dark. When the time came, he would definitely regret it. Therefore, he had decided to eliminate all of them. At this time, Dan had already brought Kai Tang to God's continent. Kai Tang also learned of Luo's current identity, the creator of the God's continent, the first ruler. Last time, Kai Tang had agreed to try out the new positions on the album with Ming, but she regretted it not long after agreeing. After she got out of bed, her legs were weak and numb for the next few days. Even when she walked, her legs were almost bowed. When it was almost evening, little Liang, who had just returned from playing near the divine continent, saw his father pressing his mother down on a round table and biting his mother with his teeth. "Let go of Nyangqin, don't bully Nyangqin. I'll call him Daddy, okay? I won't call you Uncle anymore." Little Liang angrily and anxiously pulled Dan away. Kai Tang did not expect this scene to be seen by little Liang. She was so embarrassed that she wanted to dig a hole in the ground. Because little Liang was there, Dan did not do anything. The moment he turned his head, Dan suddenly saw another little boy who had walked into the temple with little Liang. When he saw this little boy, Dan's eyes, which were originally glancing at him, instantly became as sharp as an eagle's. His pupils at this moment widened. At this time, little Liang saw that Dan had seen the little boy he had brought back. He skipped to the side of the little boy who was in a sorry state and said to Dan, "Daddy, look at him. He looks like me, doesn't he?" I saw that he looked like me and had no home to return to, so I brought him back." Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 2746. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. Taking a closer look, the dirty little boy looked 60% similar to little Liang. Although it was not 80% or 90% similar, unlike Ruo and Ce who could tell at a glance that they were father and son, one could still tell at a glance. Seeing that Ruo was staring at the boy, Kai Tang also glanced at him suspiciously. She was also stunned by what she saw. "Why do they look so alike?" Kai Tang asked while she was still in a daze. "I'll answer you later." Ruo took Kai Tang's hand, turned his head to the side and called Yuan Xing over. "Take him to be cleaned," Ruo said to Yuan Xing. If he guessed correctly, this little boy was his ancestor. As for the little boy's identity and origin, Ruo did not know. He only knew that the creator of the God's continent was his family's ancestor. However, because of his interference, this space-time had been distorted. If history had gone according to its normal course, even if Ruo did not appear under the alias of Xingfeng, this little boy and his ancestor would have ruled the entire God's continent. In the next few hundred years, Si Rua devoted all his spiritual power to creating divine artifacts to deal with the mysterious man. Finally, after 500 years, he created 3 divine artifacts that could be used to deal with the mysterious man. However, using these 3 divine artifacts required a lot of spiritual power. Si Rua's spiritual power at his peak was not enough, not to mention now that he had little spiritual power left to create these 3 divine artifacts. Just as Si Rua planned to concentrate on cultivating his spiritual power, the mysterious man led his people and attacked the God's continent. However, the mysterious man was not dealing with Lord God or the Divine Hall. He was dealing with Si Bo alone. Si Rua knew this very well. At night he called the little boy Kai Tang and Yuan Xing, who were brought back by little Liang Liang, to the temple. At this time the little boy and little Liang Liang had grown up for nearly 500 years, and their strength was astonishing. Si Rua poured all his spiritual power into the little boy and Yuan Xing, and handed the future of the God's continent directly to the little boy. Xiao Liang Liang did not express any dissatisfaction. Yuan Xian, listen to me. Take these 3 artifacts back to Earth. You must hide them in a place where no one can easily find them. Also, you must remember to leave some things about me on Earth. Use the words of the divine continent to carve them on a rock in the Purple Cherry Garden of Z country. My mother, Yun Jian, will go to this place called Purple Cherry Garden in the future. As for the Purple Cherry Garden, it's currently within Z country's borders. Si-Wan told Yuan Xing all of this. He was ready to fight to the death with the mysterious man. However, he had made sufficient preparations for the future of his mother, Yun Jian, and father, Ce. He hoped that the things he left behind could help his parents defeat the mysterious man. To change the future. I, Yuan Xing, swear to the heavens that I will definitely complete the mission. Yuan Jin looked at Si Dan, waved his hand, and a ghost mask appeared in his hand. He put it on, turned around, put away the 3 divine weapons, and left the temple without looking back. Tang Tang Yu. Si Rua looked at Kai Tang and his son, Xiao Liang Liang, and was about to leave. Kai Tang held Xing Feng with one hand and her son, Xiao Liang Liang, with the other hand and said to Si Ming, "We are a family. We live together and die together. Don't think about leaving us." After hearing Kai Tang's words, Si Rua smiled. He also held Kai Tang with one hand and said to Kai Tang and Xiao Liang Liang, "I will protect you. Even if we die, we will be together." Chapter 2747. The little boy brought back by little Liang Liang had indeed ruled the entire God's continent. He was also the ancestor of the main gods and the godly lords. However, due to the long history, the main god only knew that his father was the ruler of the God's continent. He did not know who his grandfather was anymore. That was because the gods of the God's continent had an endless lifespan. Unless they were killed by someone, they would not die. Back then, the little boy did not know the whereabouts of Si Luan, Kai Tang, and little Liang Liang. He only knew that Si Luan and the other 2 were taken away by a mysterious person. The 3 of them did not die. They were only imprisoned somewhere. As for where they were imprisoned, only Si Luan, Kai Tang, and little Liang Liang knew. Many years had passed since Si Luan, Kai Tang, and little Liang Liang went missing on the God's continent. It was so long that the main god's father was born and ruled the God's continent. When the main god's father fell, the main god ruled the God's continent. The birth of the godly Lord Ce was a coincidence. It was also an ill-fated relationship. During a temple gathering, the main god took a fancy to Bailey Yin, who was known as the #1 beauty of the God's continent at that time. The main god confessed to Bailey Yin in private, but Bailey Yin rejected him. Later, on the Bailey family's 10,000th birthday, the main god raped Bailey Yin on an empty rock garden in the Bailey family's backyard. He did not expect Bailey Yin to be pregnant with the main god's child. Bailey Yin wanted to hide from the main god. She even went to the mountain to steal herbs that could induce abortion. However, the main god mistook her for wanting to commit suicide by jumping off the divine rock of destruction. Later, the main god was so angry that he tore off her clothes. He wanted to force himself on her again. However, he saw her protruding 5-month-old belly. When he saw that Bailey Yin was pregnant, the main god was happy. However, he could not help but want Bailey Yin again. The second time, Bailey Yin felt great. However, she still could not forgive the main god. She was pressed down by the main god in the temple's bedroom. She could clearly see her beautiful legs propped up on his body in the mirror not far away from the bedroom. She allowed him to penetrate her quickly. Shame. This was no ordinary shame. Don't. Let go of me. Get lost. Get lost. Bailey Yin pushed the main god as she cried and endured his love. After that, Bailey Yen put on her clothes and ran out of the temple. She was so fast that the main god could not catch up to her. Since Bailey Yan's child was 5 months old, she had been staying in her boudoir, sleeping in her bedroom and not going out. 2 months later, Bailey Yan's stomach was already 7 months old. It was so big that she was about to give birth. On this day, Patriarch Bailey brought the people of the Bailey family to Bailey Yan's boudoir to check on Bailey Yan's condition. She had always said that she was seriously ill and had been lying in bed for 2 months. She had been eating and drinking in bed. The 7th and 8th aunts of the Bailey family all came to visit Bailey Yen. But just as everyone was about to leave, a mischievous 5-year-old child suddenly ran over and pulled the blanket away from Bailey Yen, who had wrapped herself tightly before she could react. Under the blanket, Bailey Yan's belly had already grown into a rubber ball. Housemaster Bailey as well as everyone in the Bailey family saw it. The Bailey family's patriarch's face turned pale in an instant. Your belly? Yen, your belly? Bailey Feng, her brother who doted on her the most, was stunned when he saw that her belly was so big that it was obvious that she was about to give birth. This was the first time in his life that he stuttered. Nonsense. Nonsense. So you were pretending to be sick. Bailey Yen. How did I educate you? Get lost. Get off the bed right now. Tell me. Whose bastard child is this in your belly? As Bailey Yan's father, Housemaster Bailey had always been proud of Bailey Yan's elegance. But when he saw Bailey Yan's protruding belly, his face turned completely pale. The daughter that he thought highly of had suddenly done something unforgivable. Housemaster Bailey rushed to Bailey Yan's bed. As he pulled, he wanted to drag Bailey Yen off the bed in front of everyone in the Bailey family. Tell me. Which bastard child is this? You won't tell me, right? How dare you lie to your father and family? If you don't tell me, get out of the Bailey family immediately. Our Bailey family doesn't want a daughter like you. Housemaster Bailey ignored Bailey Yan's explanation and was about to drag her out of the door. No one's explanation was of any use. Just as Bailey Yen was being dragged to the door by Housemaster Bailey and forced to ask who the bastard who made her pregnant was, a tall figure walked in from outside the door. The person who came was the current ruler of the God's continent, the Lord. The Lord walked to Bailey Yan's side in a few steps and saved Bailey Yen from Housemaster Bailey's hands. He rubbed his chest and said to Housemaster Bailey in front of everyone, "It's not her fault. I couldn't hold back and forced her on your 10,000th birthday. So the child in your belly is mine. Come. Wonderful book house." Chapter 27:48. Even if he had done something bad, he was still upright and upright. As soon as this male voice sounded, Patriarch Bailey almost reflexively wanted to turn his head and strangle the owner of this male voice to death. But when he saw that the person who had come was none other than the current ruler of the God's continent, the Master God, even Patriarch Bailey, who had been upright and upright all his life, had to throw his anger to the back of his head. Master God. Patriarch Bailey and the dozens of people in the house suppressed their anger and bowed to the Master God. The Master God, who was being worshipped by the Bailey family, had one hand around Bailey Yen. He was about to speak about marrying Bailey Yen. Bailey Yen suddenly lowered her head in front of everyone and bit the Master God's wrist hard. Bailey Yen's pupils were covered with red veins. If one didn't look closely, they would look like the eyes of a ferocious wolf biting the flesh of its prey. Even her gums were buried in the flesh of the Master God's wrist. Not to mention how painful it must be for the person who was bitten. But no matter how deep his wrist was bitten, the Master God still didn't let go of Bailey Yen's hand. Bailey Yen raised her eyes angrily. She, who was usually elegant, shouted in front of the Bailey family's head and the dozens of people from the Bailey family, "What are you doing? It's not him. This child isn't his. He's talking nonsense. The child's father is already dead. I was indecent so I had a child. It has nothing to do with Master God." But with so many people watching, everyone could see that Bailey Yen was unusually agitated after the Master God appeared. It was as if she was afraid that something that shouldn't be discovered would be discovered. Bailey Yen knew that once she admitted it, then being forced to marry the chief god would definitely be a done deal. But she didn't want to. She didn't want to marry a rapist. A man who forced himself on her. So even at the last moment, Bailey Yen had to fight for a chance to resist. But who knew that the Master God would snort coldly and hold Bailey Yen tightly? He said something that made Bailey Yen completely collapse. "Who would believe your words? From the moment my flesh and blood was born in your womb, your future was mine. I insisted on marrying you. From the beginning you had no room to refuse." This was the first time the Master God had revealed such a serious expression in front of Bailey Yen. Yes, it was just as he said. From the very beginning, he had taken a liking to her, so there was no room for rejection in her life. Bailey Yan's eyes lost their color, and she collapsed in the Master God's arms like a porcelain doll. The people of the Bailey clan were angry, but they didn't dare to say anything. In the end, the Bailey family still married Bailey Yan to the temple. 3 months later, Bailey Yan gave birth to a boy named Divine Lord. The Divine Sovereign was the future successor of the God's continent. However, whenever she saw a newborn Divine Lord, Bailey Yan would think of the Lord God. Therefore, when the child was born, Bailey Yan threw the Divine Lord far away. Whenever she saw the child, she would cover her ears and scream. Perhaps to many people, Bailey Yan was pitiful and hateful. She even abandoned her own child. Even the future Bailey Yan herself felt that she was too extreme in the past. But there was always a time when one was young. At this time, Bailey Yan was equivalent to the puberty of an earthling. Her life had just begun, and she was already being raised by a sovereign. This feeling caused Bailey Yan to break down. I'm not eating. I'm not eating. All of you get lost. Get lost. Bailey Yan knocked over all the dishes that the Temple Lord God subordinates had brought over. The Master God had just entered the bedroom, and this was the first thing he saw. Almost in a flash, the Master God appeared behind Bailey Yan and picked her up from behind. However, Bailey Yan struggled wildly. She even used her fingernails to scratch the Master God's handsome face. I don't want to see you. Get lost. If you have the ability, let me go home. What's the use of your identity to bully me? Chapter 2749. Bailey Yan was in the chief god's arms. She cried, screamed, and hit him. He endured it silently. As long as she stayed by his side, he would do anything. At this time, the chief god even thought that as long as he did not let go, Bailey Yan would forgive him one day. Hence, after Bailey Yan hit and scolded him and calmed down, the chief god still allowed her to stay here. After about 100 times, Bailey Yan turned into a walking corpse. When she had just finished her confinement, as long as the main god touched her, she would frantically slap the main god and even scratch the main god with her fingernails. She would never allow the main god to touch her. Now Bailey Yan was much more obedient. When he fed her, she would eat. When he pulled her out, she would follow him. However, there was no longer a smile on her face. No matter how the chief god teased her, she would not smile. During the 2 days after her confinement, the chief god wanted to touch her and have sex with her. Bailey Yan acted as if she was on a battlefield. She was as crazy as a wild dog. However, she realized that it was useless no matter how much trouble she caused. Even when the chief god proposed to have sex with her, she did not nod or reject him. She allowed the chief god to press her down on the bed like an inflatable doll. She did not make a sound. When the Lord God was 2 years old, there was a day when the Lord God was crazier than ever before with Bailey Yan. Even Bailey Yan, who had good endurance and did not make a sound during sex, could not help but moan. She was almost sent flying off the edge of the bed by the chief god several times. After they were done, the chief god tossed her a piece of white paper. Bailey Yan did not look at it. However, the chief god's words attracted the attention of Bailey Yan, who had been uninterested in the outside world for many years. This is the letter of divorce. You may leave. The chief god's heart turned cold. Only then did Bailey Yan slowly turn her head to look at the chief god. Her tightly shut lips twitched for a while. She looked at the chief god in disbelief. What did you say? Leave before I change my mind? Otherwise you won't be able to leave. The chief god glanced at Bailey Yan. A hint of gloominess flashed past his eyes. He walked out of the bedroom door. Bailey Yan watched the chief god leave. The moment the chief god left the bedroom, she held the piece of white paper and dashed out of the place. Bailey Yan finally returned to the Bailey family. Everyone in the Bailey family kept their mouths shut about this matter. Thousands of years had passed since then. In the past few thousand years, Bailey Yan had never seen the Master God again, but she often saw her son, the Divine Monarch. Later on, it was said that her son, the Divine Sovereign, had inherited the position of the ruler of the God's continent. However, no one knew why he had left the God's continent. Bailey Yan only knew that the Lord God had retired and changed his appearance to that of an old man in his 60s or 70s. Actually, at this point, Bailey Yan no longer hated the sovereigns. When she was young, she hated the Lord God to the core. But now, when she thought about it, she didn't have any other men in her life. If she had stayed with the Lord God for the rest of her life, it would have been pretty good. However, what had happened in the past could no longer return. Bailey Yan had always thought so until her son brought Yun Jian back to see her. The temple was attacked by a mysterious person and the Master God was seriously injured. She didn't expect that after thousands of years, they would meet again when he was seriously injured. Bailey Yin had an indescribable feeling at that time. Get out of the Bailey family as soon as you've recovered. This was the first thing Bailey Yin said after she agreed to let the Lord God stay in the Bailey family temporarily. However, as she stayed, the Lord God asked her if she wasn't lonely after so many years without a man. When he wanted to. Bailey Yin had a cheap mouth and agreed. Since then the Lord God stayed in the Bailey family. Yin Yin, at your age you're old enough to be an old witch on earth. Come back with me, I know I was wrong back then. Please forgive me for marrying such an outstanding daughter-in-law for our son. Early in the morning the Lord God blocked the door to Bailey Yan's room. Get out. Bailey Yin couldn't help but shout. Yin Yin, if you don't come back with me I'll lie here and never get up. I'll shout that you bullied me. The Lord God started to act shamelessly. Bailey Yin rubbed her forehead. She wanted to ignore the Lord God. Unexpectedly, the Lord God shouted at her from behind. Bailey Yin, do you know that you're ugly? You're so ugly. Who else would want an old woman like you other than me? Because of this, Bailey Yin chased the Lord God around the Bailey family for 3 days and 3 nights. Chapter 2750. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Yun Jian CE Return to the Mainland Main God Bailey Yen 4. Page 1/1. Huff huff, damn old man, stop running if you have the guts. If you don't stop I will kill you today. Bailey Yen put her hands on her waist and lowered her head in exhaustion. She panted heavily and raised her head to look at the main god who was standing on a high slope not far away. Seeing that she was too tired to catch up, he stopped and looked at her with his hands on his waist. Don't run if you have the guts. Bailey Yen stomped her feet angrily. She wiped her tears and sweat and rushed up the steep slope. Bailey Yen had already chased the main god for 3 days and 3 nights. This matter was already known by everyone in the Bailey family. Even her brother, Bailey Feng, who hated the main god because his sister was bullied by the main god, couldn't help but shake his head and follow Bailey Yen and the main god. I won't run. The main god stood on the high slope and saw that Bailey Yen was panting as she chased after him. He really didn't run. After chasing for 3 whole days, Bailey Yen was probably tired. But when she saw that the main god really stood there and didn't run, she ran up as fast as she could. She thought that the moment she caught him, she would use her hands to fiercely twist his face until it turned red. But the moment Bailey Yen ran towards the Master God's side as she ran, she suddenly tripped on a large rock and twisted her ankle. Because she had just run up a high slope, if she fell, although she wouldn't die, Bailey Yen didn't have the strength to use her spiritual power now. She fell, it would definitely hurt. Who knew that when the main god was more than 10 meters away, he suddenly saw this and came to Bailey Yan's side in a flash. He pulled Bailey Yen and pulled her into his arms. Damn old man, you actually dare to say that I am ugly. Old woman. How am I old? You are the old man. Don't you like to become an old man? Didn't you use the appearance of an old man for thousands of years? You are the old man. After Bailey Yen was pulled into the Master God's embrace, she was like an old maiden. She stood on her tiptoes, stretched out her hand, and pinched the Master God's handsome face until it was swollen and purple. Frighteningly, when the Master Deity saw this, he did not fight back at all. Instead, he looked at Bailey Yen and smiled foolishly. Yin Yin, to be honest, if you can come back to the temple with me, I'll even let you ruin your face. The sovereign god suddenly became serious. On the other hand, Bailey Yen blushed when she heard the Lord God's sudden serious words. She retracted her hand and turned around to leave. She even said, "That's impossible. There's never been such a thing in my life," before he could say the word, opportunity. The Lord God suddenly hugged Bailey Yen from behind, leaned back and rolled on the ground with Bailey Yen like a child, howling loudly, "Lord God! Yin Yin, how much have you eaten in the past few thousand years? You must weigh at least 500 or 600 pounds, right? My waist has been broken by you, you have to compensate me. If you don't take good care of me, I won't accept it." The Lord God howled. He leaned his back against the ground and let Bailey Yen lie on his body. He even narrowed his eyes and looked into the distance. He saw that his son had brought his daughter-in-law and grandchildren back to see him. Ouch, I'm going to die. The Lord God hugged Bailey Yen tightly and refused to let her leave. He acted shamelessly. In the distance, Ce held onto Yun Jian's little hand and walked over. When she saw this scene, her eyelids twitched and 3 black lines appeared in front of her eyes. Mama, are Grandpa and Grandma rolling around in circles? At this moment, the little girl who was held by Yun Jian looked into the distance and turned to ask Yun Jian. At this moment, the little girl and the little fellow were already 3 years old. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 2751. Page 1/1. No. Yun Jian rubbed the little girl's head and did not explain further. Oh. The little girl looked at the main god who was hugging Bailey Yen with all his might. Bailey Yen was struggling to stand up. She tilted her head and looked at them in surprise. The little girl suddenly turned her head and looked at the little boy. She excitedly suggested to her brother, who was also 3 years old, Big brother, let's also roll around like Grandpa and Grandma, okay? The little boy rolled his eyes at the little girl's suggestion. Hey, idiot. The 3-year-old little boy did not want to play such a childish and boring game with the little girl. After being called an idiot by her brother, the little girl's face immediately fell. She pulled Yun Jian's hand and suddenly said, if Big Brother Iran was here, he would definitely play with me. The little boy heard the little girl's words and was instantly dissatisfied. He wanted to threaten his sister but was suddenly hit on the head by Ce. The little boy rubbed his head and snorted. He turned to the side and did not say anything. Bailey Yen, who was on a high slope in the distance, had already seen Yun Jian and Ce's family of 4. She was helpless as the main god was hugging her tightly and was unwilling to let go. She said in exasperation, Fine. Let go first. The children are back. You damned old man, what are you doing? Bailey Yan's helpless words caused the main god to come back to his senses. He quickly let go of her and said something that he was afraid Bailey Yen would not admit to. Yen, you've never gone back on your words. Then it's a deal. Yun Jian and Ce, who were standing in the distance, naturally knew that the main god was chasing Bailey Yen. However, they did not know that the main god's way of chasing Bailey Yen was so shameless. Because of the arrival of Yun Jian and Ce, the Bailey family became much livelier. What really made the Bailey family lively was the arrival of the little fellow and the little girl. Even the Lord God, thanks to Yun Jian and Ce's blessings, was once again able to move into the Bailey clan. However, Bailey Yen had arranged for him to stay in the Bailey clan, which was the furthest place from her residence. In the past few days, Bailey Yen had received love letters from the little girl. However, the words written on it were telling Bailey Yen that the Master God was uncultured. You are the clouds in the sky. I love you. I want to pluck the clouds in the sky and hold them in my arms. Or you are lonely. Hug me. Let us be together forever and ever. And the most shocking sentence was, Yen, I love you. Even if you become a cloud in the sky or a pile of dog shit on the ground, I will still love you. Even if the rice is stolen by rats, I will get it back and give it to you, the one I love the most. Rats love rice. It was defended in this way. Bailey Yen seriously suspected that these love letters were pieced together by the Lord God from somewhere. Furthermore, they were copied in a dubious manner. However, when she saw these love letters, Bailey Yen was indeed secretly happy. She laughed while covering her mouth. The little girl was bribed by the Lord God. Every day, she would hand over a love letter written by the Lord God to her on time. Because it was from the little girl, her own granddaughter, Bailey Yen couldn't refuse it. However, she was hatefully thinking about the Lord God in her heart. The sinister man. Yen, are you thinking that a sinister man like me should be beaten to death? Just as Bailey Yen was sitting in front of her dressing table, hatefully thinking about the Lord God's actions and thinking that such a hateful and abominable man should be dragged out and beaten to death, a familiar hateful male voice suddenly sounded behind her. Bailey Yen was so frightened that she knocked over her chair and stood up. Just as she was about to shout, "Why are you here?" Before she could say anything, the Lord God covered her mouth. Yen, don't make a sound. It would be strange if she didn't make a sound. Who knew what strange things he was going to do again? After the Lord God let go, Bailey Yen opened her mouth and wanted to shout again. Unexpectedly, the Lord God stuffed a finger into her mouth, blocking her mouth as she was about to shout. His other hand circled around Bailey Yan's waist and flipped Bailey Yen onto the edge of the bed in 2 moves. He even left behind a sentence that was comparable to a hooligan's. Yen likes Yuan a lot, right? Then let's have a few more children. A few more children who are prettier than Yuan and much more handsome than Si Ming, that brat who's not cute at all and wants to be beaten up with just one look. Don't tell me you don't want to. Look at how wet you are. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 2752. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. Bailey Yin was once again tricked by the Master God's glib tongue into going to bed. However, Bailey Yin regretted it after that. Get up, get up. You better forget about what happened just now. Otherwise, don't even think about stepping into the Bailey family again. Bailey Yin covered her chest. She was only wearing a thin piece of underwear. Her other hand grabbed the Lord God's ear tightly and pulled him up from the bed. If it was 1,000 years ago, Bailey Yin would not have been able to do such a thing. Firstly, Bailey Yin was timid back then. Secondly, it was probably because the position of the ruler of the God's continent had fallen into her son's hands. In other words, Bailey Yin was no longer afraid of the Master God. Ouch, 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 be gentler. My ear, it's going to be broken by you. Although the Master God muttered and stood up like Bailey Yin was grabbing his ear, he did not reach out to pull away Bailey Yin's hand that was grabbing his ear. You can still feel pain. Shameless old man. Bailey Yin pulled the Master God's ear angrily. She wanted to drag the Master God out of the door of her room. She thought that the Master God would not leave after being dragged out of the bed. However, after the Master God got out of the bed, he walked out of the door obediently. Bailey Yin was stunned. She did not realize what he was doing for a long time. However, Bailey Yin knew that the Master God would not leave obediently. As expected, when the Master God placed his hand on the door and was about to open it, he suddenly turned to look at Bailey Yin. He smiled wickedly and said, "My son and daughter-in-law are outside. Yin, if you want me to leave, I'll leave." As he spoke, he placed his hand on the door and tried to open it. "No, don't open it." Bailey Yin's expression changed. She quickly ran forward and grabbed the Master God's hand that was about to open the door. "Don't leave. Sleep in my room tonight." Bailey Yin urged him to stay. It was already very late. If the Master God really walked out of her room in front of Yun Jian and Ce, anyone with a discerning eye would know what he was doing in her room. "Since Yin doesn't want me to leave, then I'll stay and accompany you." The Master God arrogantly walked to Bailey Yan's bed and slept on Bailey Yan's snow-white bed. No one saw the evil smile on the Master God's face when his back was facing Bailey Yin. Bailey Yin curled her lips. She couldn't do anything to the Lord God. In the end, she leaned against the bed next to the Lord God and fell asleep. As soon as she went to bed, the Master God openly hugged her waist and fell asleep like a married couple. Bailey Yan's body swayed a little. Seeing that the Lord God was holding on to her without letting go, she finally shook her head helplessly and fell asleep. Early the next morning, Bailey Yin stretched lazily. As soon as she opened her eyes and looked to the side, there was no trace of the Lord God. She didn't care at first. Who would have thought that after a while the little girl would start knocking on the door? The sound of the little girl's sobbing could be heard as well. "Grandma, open the door." They said that Grandpa accidentally fell into some rock. They said that Grandpa will never come back and can't play with us anymore. Yuan is so scared. Daddy and Mommy went to look for Grandpa, but no one cared about Yuan. "Grandma, Yuan is scared." God-destroying rock. There was only one God-destroying rock in the God's continent. Moreover, the gods who fell into the God-destroying rock, even if they were the former ruler of the God's continent, couldn't escape the fact that their souls were scattered. Bailey Yan's head exploded. She rushed out of the room at the same time. She didn't even have time to bend down to hug the crying little girl. "What did you say?" Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 2753. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, Main God Bailey Yin 7. Page 1/1. Bailey Yan's face turned pale when she heard the sudden news that the main god had fallen into the god-slaying rock. "Whoa, Grandma, don't yell at Yuan. Yuan is scared." The little girl was frightened by Bailey Yan's slightly louder voice. Tears streamed down her face as she took 2 steps back. She seemed to be in shock. "Grandma didn't do it on purpose. Go look for your brother." Bailey Yin said something to the little girl that she did not even know what she had said. Then she ran out in big strides. There was a commotion outside the Bailey family. Everyone seemed to have heard the same thing when they woke up. The main god had accidentally fallen into the god-slaying rock. There was an 80% chance that he had died in the god-slaying rock. When Bailey Yin heard the news, her heart went up and down. She grabbed the people who were gossiping and shouted, "What main god fell into the god-slaying rock? What nonsense are you talking about? How could he have fallen into the god-slaying rock?" "Mrs. True. I heard that the Lord God fell into the god-destroying rock in order to To pluck a flower that only blooms once every tens of thousands of years for you. He said that he wanted to give you a surprise. The servant of the Bailey family, who was caught by Bailey Yen for questioning, spoke to Bailey Yen with a sigh. If the main god had lied to her, this matter would not have been blown out of proportion. Bailey Yen ran with the fastest speed she had ever run in her life to the cliff where the main god had fallen into the god-slaying rock. Yun Jian, Ce, and everyone in the Bailey family were all standing there. Yun Jian and Ce planned to go down the cliff to investigate the god-slaying rock. When Bailey Yen ran here, her hair was messy. Even the buttons in front of her clothes were not properly buttoned. She looked like a crazy woman. He's fine. He's fine, isn't he? Bailey Yan's first reaction when she ran here was to ask about the main god's condition. However, she saw that her father, the Bailey family master, who had never lied, suddenly raised his tired head and looked in her direction. In the next second, her father, the Bailey family master, shook his head. "No. It shouldn't be like this, it shouldn't be like this. He won't fall off the god-slaying rock, he won't." Bailey Yan's tears flowed down like water. Over the past few thousand years, other than forcing her to marry him when they first met, he had always doted on her and granted her every request. Perhaps the main god had done something that a woman could not forgive. But he gave her the love that even her father didn't have. It would be a lie to say that he didn't love her. "Can you come out? Don't scare me. I'm scared. As long as you come out, I'll really listen to you. I'll marry you again, okay? I just want you to come back." Bailey Yen squatted down slowly at the edge of the cliff. Tears clouded her eyes. Thinking back to how well the Master God had treated her, she thought that there might not be a second person in this world who was willing to give her his heart as long as she wanted it. Bailey Yan's heart was in so much pain that she couldn't breathe. 10 seconds had passed, nothing happened. Just as Bailey Yen raised her leg and wanted to jump off the cliff with the Master God and enter the god-slaying rock while no one was paying attention, she climbed from the bottom of the cliff to the edge with one hand. In the next second, the Master God came to Bailey Yen with a precious flower in his hands. He was dirty from head to toe, but he handed the flower that didn't have a speck of dust to Bailey Yen and said, "Yen, I heard it just now. You said that you're willing to marry me again. You can't go back on your word." Bailey Yen had once told the Overgod that she wanted to obtain this flower when she had been imprisoned in the sacred hall. At that time she was just saying it out of anger. She knew that this flower was near the god-slaying rock and was extremely dangerous. Even if the Master God wanted to get this flower, it would also be extremely dangerous. But he didn't forget. He didn't forget her unintentional words. Bailey Yen was so angry that she slapped the Master God in the face. But in the next second she threw herself into his arms and cried, "You're crazy. What if you die? Do you want to die?" A man who was willing to risk his life for her words. She had missed 1,000 years. Naturally, she wouldn't make the same mistake again. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 2754. Page 1/1, June 1, 2005. Children's Day. It had been exactly 2 months since Yun Jian and Si Yi's epic wedding on April 1, 2005. This also meant that Team Monarch had been disbanded for 2 months. In 2005, Yun Jian was already 21 years old. It had been 7 years since Yun Jian was reborn to Xinjiang town from 1998 to 2005. When Yun Jian and Si Yi suddenly disappeared after attending the church wedding, Qin Yiru, Gujun Jian, and the others broke out in cold sweat. On April 2, Yun Jian and Si Yi disappeared without a word. For 2 whole months, the elders of Kosha mercenaries, the 4 leaders of An Hun Group and Blood Doll worked together to search for Yun Jian and Si Yi globally. At the same time in An Hun Group's meeting room, all the higher-ups of Kosha mercenaries, An Hun Group and Blood Doll were gathered in the room for an internal meeting. "If you ask me, young master must have taken young mistress to a secluded place for their honeymoon," Adam said with a slap on the table. "Are we still looking then?" Shuang asked. "It's been 2 whole months and Sister Jian isn't back yet. A honeymoon doesn't have to take that long, does it?" Lung Mei crossed her arms. After saying that, Lung Mei stomped her feet and glanced at Di Lin beside her. She spoke in a complaining tone. "We're both married but someone didn't even spend a day with me on our honeymoon." Right after Leng Mei said that, the leader of Kosha Mercenaries intelligence team, Diana, who had been tracking Yun Jian's mobile ID with her laptop, stood up and closed her laptop, shaking her head. Sister Jian's mobile ID is reinforced with an advanced firewall. I can't track her location. There's no need to look. Young master and young mistress will be fine. Seeing that the higher-ups of Kosha Mercenaries and Hun Group and Blood Doll had been having an emergency meeting for more than an hour but nothing was discussed, Lin Wei, who had been quiet all this while, suddenly spoke up. That's right. Young Master and Young Mistress definitely don't want us to disturb them. They'll be back when it's time. Besides, Young Master and Young Mistress are still in Longmen City, Mo Sen chimed in. Not only were their personalities similar, their thoughts were similar as well. Fine, I'm not looking anymore. Adam grabbed a handful of his hair and kicked the door open before walking out of the conference room. Then everyone dispersed. Yun Jian and Ce, who were the subject of heated discussions among the world's top 3 organizations, were on a honeymoon trip around the world. The next stop was the Ice Pot Cave in J City, Zhe province of Z country. The Curling Cave was a scenic spot in the mountains. The Ice Pot Cave was located between the mountain and the underground cave. It was 580 meters above sea level and 120 meters deep. The caves here were all formed naturally. Coupled with the illumination of some neon lights, it was simply too beautiful to take in. Yun Jian and Ce had just bought tickets to enter the cave. It was dark inside the cave. Other than the neon lights, there was nothing else. Hey, miss, can you help me take a family photo with my camera? Less than 10 minutes after Yun Jian and Ce entered the cave, someone tapped Yun Jian's shoulder from behind. Yun Jian turned to see a teenage girl around 16 or 17 years old. The girl tilted her head and smiled at her. When she smiled, the 2 little dimples under her cheeks were mesmerizing. Yun Jian agreed. After taking the family photo, the girl suddenly raised her camera and told Yun Jian, Jie, let me take a photo for you guys too. You can give me your address and I'll mail it to you. Thanks for taking the photo for me just now. 3 days later, the Hun organization received an anonymous letter from J City. It was a photo of Yun Jian and Ce. Yun Jian and Ce had disappeared for 2 months. Be it the Hun organization, the Kosha Mercenaries, or the Blood Doll organization, the 3 organizations had piled up a lot of things that shouldn't have been handled by the top management of the 3 organizations. This was the reason why Yun Jian and Ce disappeared without a word. After receiving the address of the anonymous letter, the top management of the Hun organization, the Kosha Mercenaries, and the Blood Doll organization rushed to J City in Zhe province without even having time to eat, book guest house reading website. Chapter 2755. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Yun Jian and Ce, page 1/1. Although the doll was cumbersome, Yun Jian still smiled sweetly. Sure enough, it was a good choice to leave everything behind and travel with him in an unfamiliar place. My classmates are here. Just as Ce handed the doll to Yun Jian, Han Mingming suddenly waved his hand in the distance and shouted excitedly. A group of 16 or 17-year-old boys and girls about the same age as Han Mingming came into view. Only the man standing in the middle looked to be in his 30s. He had a black beard and looked quite artistic. Mingming, this is my uncle. He graduated from Yale University of Photography and returned from overseas. He is now a famous photographer in the domestic photography industry. Today, I invited him to teach us photography. At the side, a male student named Kaneki Mu pointed at the man who was nearing his 30s. He had a face full of beard and looked very artistic. You are Mumu's classmate, right? Hello. Kim Mumu's uncle crossed his arms in front of his chest and ignored everyone without saying a word. At this moment he suddenly glanced at Ce and Yun Jian. His eyes flashed and he suddenly put down his arrogant attitude and shook hands with Han Mingming. Although he was shaking hands with Han Mingming, this bearded man with an artistic aura was looking at Ce and Yun Jian. Kim Mumu's uncle was called Jin Cheng. Yun Jian and Ce naturally felt Jin Cheng's gaze, but they didn't care. Jin Cheng quickly brought Han Mingming and the others to a nearby place and taught them photography skills. However, after seeing such perfect people like Ce and Yun Jian, Jin Cheng was no longer in the mood to teach Han Mingming and the others photography skills. At this time, Ce and Yun Jian were walking on the street. Yun Jian was carrying a 1.5-meter tall doll that was only 15 centimeters shorter than her. It attracted the attention of passers-by. As she carried it, Yun Jian stuffed the doll into Ce's hands. You bought it? Take it back for me. Yun Jian raised her head and looked at Ce, who was carrying the doll with one hand. She raised her eyebrows. Ce, who had always been very calm, looked like a man who had been enchanted by a vixen in front of Yun Jian. Above his handsome face, his sharp eyes were staring at Yun Jian. He couldn't help but agree softly from his thin lips. Okay. After he said that, he reached for Yun Jian's He placed his hand on her head and her head. As you wish. Han Mingming was still learning photography from Jin Mumu's uncle, Jin Cheng. Halfway through the lesson, Jin Cheng suddenly patted Jin Mumu's shoulder. While a few of his classmates were seriously looking for angles to take photos of the surrounding people or beautiful scenery, he called his nephew Jin Mumu to the side. Uncle, why did you call me over? Jin Mumu held the camera and was very puzzled. Do you know those two people? Jin Cheng asked curiously. Which two? Jin Mumu frowned. The two people standing next to the female classmate you introduced me to, Jin Cheng said. Oh, them? I don't know them. I've never heard Mingming mention them before. They are probably new friends. Jin Mumu replied. When Jin Cheng heard this, he suddenly looked around. Then he leaned over and whispered into Jin Cheng's ear. That couple is so beautiful. I've never seen such a handsome man and a beautiful woman in my life. I'm going to participate in the International Body Art Photography Competition next month. There are too few perfect models who are willing to take photos naked. If I can get these two to cooperate with me to take photos of the body art, I'll definitely win the competition. Mumu, help me get them. In the second half of the year, I'll help you apply for admission to the overseas Yale University of Photography. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 2756. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Yun Jian and CE, page 1/1. Yun Jian gave Han Mingming a call and went back to her house first. Han Mingming was also a good girl. She returned home before 8 o'clock in the evening. As soon as she got home, Han Mingming knocked on Yun Jian and CE's bedroom door. CE was in the bathroom. Yun Jian walked out of the room. Standing in the corridor, Han Mingming said excitedly to Yun Jian, Sister, I have a male classmate tonight. He said that he knows a tour group and can bring you and brother to sign up tomorrow night. That Mandarin Duck Valley is too big. Since sister and brother are going there to have fun, just leave it to the tour group and don't worry about anything else. Sister, if you think it's okay to go with a tour group, I'll tell my classmate that you agreed to go. Yun Jian and CE had never been on a tour group before, but Yun Jian agreed. Sure. There was indeed an advantage to going with a tour group, and that was that they didn't have to find their own way. From the beginning of this global tour, CE was the one who led the way and Yun Jian was only responsible for following. It was a very happy thing to follow someone and not have to find their own way. During this period of time, CE couldn't even bear to let Yun Jian drag her luggage. It was said that the 7-year itch was fresh for some couples in the first few years, but by the 7th year, it was very likely that they would be tired of each other. Although Yun Jian and CE had just registered their marriage, they had known each other for more than 1,000 years. CE was perhaps different from any other man. The 7-year itch didn't exist to him at all. The more he pampered Yun Jian, the more he loved her. Now, he couldn't wait to spend every moment with her. The next night, CE held Yun Jian's hand and followed Han Mingming to a bridge near Han Mingming's house. The male classmate that Han Mingming was talking about was Kim Mumu. If Kim Mumu didn't introduce himself to Yun Jian and CE the previous night, then today he introduced himself to Yun Jian and CE. Hello, my name is Kim Mumu. It's like this. My uncle, the man with the long beard you saw yesterday, is also going to the Mandarin Duck Valley. Moreover, my uncle is going to the Mandarin Duck Valley for filming, so he is going to the Mandarin Duck Valley. Coincidentally, I'm on translation since I'm on English. I want to go because I want to learn photography with my uncle. I know a tour group. Let's go tomorrow. I'll take you guys. Yun Jian translation of translation Jin's Mumu, Kim Mumu. It was Han Mingming who introduced Jin Mumu to Yun Jian and CE who was taken aback. He turned to look at Jin Mumu and asked, Jin Mumu, you're going to Lover's Valley too? Didn't you say you were going to introduce a tour group to my friend? Coincidentally, I'm going. It's not like you don't know that Mandarin Duck Valley is the most suitable place for filming. Mingming, do you want to go together? Jinmu scratched his head and replied. As he spoke, Kim Mumu's eyes seemed to be drifting. Yun Jian and CE naturally could not escape their eyes. However, neither Yun Jian nor CE said anything. I won't go and join in the fun, Han Mingming shook her head. As she spoke, she suddenly grabbed Jin Mumu and walked to a spot where she thought the two of them could not hear her and told Jin Mumu, Don't worry. Mumu, when we reach the Mandarin Duck Valley, you must remember to give my friend some personal space. Han Mingming was a very meticulous person. She did not follow them to Mandarin Duck Valley because she wanted to give Yun Jian and CE some space. Okay. I'll take note of that. Kim Mumu nodded in front of Han Mingming, but his eyes were moving left and right. It was obvious that he was up to something. Translator, King Bao. Editor, Dark Gem. Chapter 2757. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation. Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. Jin Cheng's Evil Conspiracy. Yunjian CE, page 1/1. Early the next morning, the tour group gathered dozens of people and was ready to depart. Yunjian and CE arrived early and boarded the bus under the guide's guidance like regular tourists. It was a huge bus with 24 seats. Including the driver, there were 25 people in the group. The tour group recommended by Jin Mumu was not bad. The tour guide would not force the tourists to buy tourist items. Some tour guides would force the tourists to buy expensive jade, diamonds, and so on for the sake of earning money. They would cost at least tens of thousands of yuan. If the tourists refused to buy, the tour guide would be mocking them at best, preventing them from leaving or threatening them. Traveling in a tour group required caution. Mandarin Duck Valley was situated more than 1,000 meters above sea level. It took more than an hour for the bus to go up the mountain. Once they were on the mountain, the tour guide led the bus full of people to tour the tourist attractions. The attractions in the morning and afternoon were not particularly eye-catching. Mandarin Duck Valley's main attraction was the hot spring of the Mandarin Ducks Swimming Pavilion. Therefore, the tour guide brought everyone to the hot spring at night. The group was given a night to soak in the hot spring before heading straight to the hotel provided by the hot spring restaurant. This was the plan. When they arrived at the hot spring, Jin Mumu and his uncle Jin Cheng disappeared. No one knew where they had gone, but Yun Jian, who knew what Han Mingming had told Jin Mumu previously, thought that he had avoided them and wanted her to be alone with CE. It was a pity that the outdoor hot spring here was only for men and women. There was no private hot spring, so Yun Jian and CE could not bathe together. Xiao Jian, I'll wait for you in the room. Standing at the intersection of the hot springs, CE brushed Yun Jian's hair behind her ear. Standing at the spot where the hot springs were crowded with tourists, he suddenly lowered his head and bit Yun Jian's ear. The numbing words sent a shiver down Yun Jian's spine. She pushed CE's firm chest and answered softly, "Emma." With that, she turned and entered the hot spring. Inside the hot spring, there were several large open-air hot springs and places for showers. It could be said that the equipment was quite abundant. Usually when one entered a hot spring, one had to strip naked. At least, most of the women in the ladies' hot springs would walk around naked. Yun Jian wrapped herself in a bathrobe and walked into the innermost hot spring. Lifting his bathrobe, he stepped into the hot spring and soaked his body in the warm spring water. Although there were a few women around the hot spring, strangely there weren't many of them. The woman who was soaking in the same hot spring as Yun Jian was with her child. The woman raised her hand and suddenly tied her hair. However, her child accidentally missed a step. The child was small to begin with, and with this slip, his entire body slipped into the hot spring. With her eyes closed, Yun Jian scooped something into the hot spring without even looking. The woman's child was pulled out of the water in time. Seeing that, the woman's face changed in fear. She hurriedly walked over to hug her daughter and thanked Yun Jian. "Thank you so much." "Thank you." "You're welcome," Yun Jian replied softly. She didn't open her eyes from the beginning to the end. The woman thanked Yun Jian again. Just as she finished thanking her, the woman lowered her head and pursed her lips. She thought about it and finally glanced at Yun Jian as if she had something on her mind. In the end, the woman couldn't help but whisper into Yun Jian's ear, "Miss, why don't you leave now? Don't come here to soak in the hot spring again or..." At this moment, a male voice suddenly sounded, "Leave? Since you're in the hot spring, then don't leave. Isn't it good to be my mannequin here?" As soon as she finished speaking, Jin Cheng led a group of men and swaggered into New Tang Hot Spring from outside. Behind Jin Cheng was Jin Mumu, who had done something wrong. At this moment, Jin Cheng looked at Yun Jian with a determined expression. He thought that Yun Jian must be naked in the hot spring like all the other women in the hot spring. Thinking of this, he suddenly laughed. "Ah, you're Yun Jian, right? I've had my eyes on you since a long time ago. That figure, that appearance, tisk tsk. It's such a pity if you don't contribute to Z country's body art industry. Now I'll give you a chance. Be my mannequin here. Believe me, I'll help you strip naked and take beautiful photos. I'll show your most perfect female side to everyone." Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 2758. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation. Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. Yun Jian CE, page 1/1. Yun Jian's words were similar to Jin Cheng's arrogant words when he threw his postcard at Yun Jian. As soon as he said that, Jean Cheng's face instantly darkened to a frightening degree. Uncle. The chairman of New Cruise, the boss of Falcon Hall, and the boss of Kosha Mercenaries. He seems quite young. Jean Mumu, who was standing behind Jean Cheng, panicked and scared when he heard Yun Jian's words. Jean Mumu looked at Yun Jian fearfully as he backed away from the hot spring. What are you panicking for? Didn't you hear the teachers say that you should be rational when you're kidnapped? She's no different from a smart student who's shouting, "The police are here," to her kidnapper. Women in this society are smart. It's not the first time I've met a difficult woman. You think you can scare me with such little tricks? You want me to let her go? I haven't been in the photography industry for more than 10 years for nothing. Jean Cheng was naturally much more experienced than Jean Mumu. He stretched out his hand and without turning his head or turning around, he grabbed Jean Mumu's hand and said in an old-fashioned manner, "Old Cheng, how many women don't love money these days? Go and find her man, give them some money and let them shoot for us. Isn't that the best of both worlds? We don't lack money." A photographer who stood behind Jean Cheng raised the HD camera in his hand. He was eager to take a nude shot of Yun Jian when he saw her because he was in pursuit of artistic vibe. Jean Cheng turned his head and gave the photographer a sidelong glance. The photographer immediately shut up. As a graduate of Yale University of Photography and a top photographer in the country, Jean Cheng had some prestige. Name your price. Let's not talk nonsense. Be it New Cruise, Falcon Hall or Wuxia Mercenaries, the bunch of disobedient women I've met before, they've resorted to all sorts of tricks. There's a woman who said she's the president's daughter. Do I believe her? Can I believe that? Wasn't this nonsense? 1 million. Just one take tonight with your man. Don't be so shameless. One take and you get 1 million. It's not like I'm going to F***ck you. Jean Cheng said to Yun Jian. At this point he took out a bank card from his suit pocket and threw it to Yun Jian. There's only 50,000 in the card now. After you and your man cooperate with me to take photos tonight, I'll transfer the remaining 950,000 into this card. As he spoke, Jean Cheng touched his head with a noble look on his face. Those who didn't know him would think that he was a domineering CEO. Just as Jean Cheng finished speaking, Yun Jian raised her eyes and glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. Her red lips curled up slightly as she spoke. 1 million, huh? Yes. That's right, as long as you and your man are together, the money is yours. Jean Cheng thought that Yun Jian was going to agree, so he quickly said, "There's no need for 1 million. After Jean Cheng finished speaking, Yun Jian's words shocked everyone present even more. No need for 1 million then, 50,000 is enough. Yun Jian stepped on the bank card that Jean Cheng had just given her. With a stomp of her foot, the bank card bounced up and was firmly grasped in her hand. Hearing this, Jean Cheng's eyes lit up. 50,000 is enough? Haha, you should have done this long ago. After taking photos of you and your man's body art, we'll show it to the whole world. By then you'll be famous. Giving you 50,000 is already very good. It's good that you understand." Jean Cheng narrowed his eyes and nodded with a smile. Just as he was about to ask Yun Jian to take off her clothes, Yun Jian suddenly strode forward and gave Jean Cheng a fierce kick. At the same time, a butterfly knife appeared in her hand out of nowhere. The butterfly knife moved horizontally and directly cut through Jean Cheng's shirt and pants. In the next second, Jean Cheng's clothes from head to toe instantly disintegrated and split open like broken fabric. Everyone present had no time to react at all. By the time everyone reacted, Yun Jian had already put away the butterfly knife. At the same time, Jean Cheng was also kicked into a nearby hot spring by Yun Jian's kick, splashing water all over his body. Suddenly, without waiting for Jean Cheng to react, Yun Jian held the 50,000 bank card that Jean Cheng had thrown to her and threw it into the hot spring that Jean Cheng had fallen into. The card happened to hit Jean Cheng's head in a sorry state. Instead, she looked down at Jean Cheng coldly and said to Jean Cheng as promised, and the words that she said to Jean Cheng had already spread throughout the venue. 50,000 yuan for your body art photo is already enough for you. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 2759. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Yun Jian CE page 1/1. Jean Cheng, who was kicked into the hot spring, heard Yun Jian's words. Under the gaze of the female models and the dozen male photographers he had brought along, including his nephew Jean Mumu, he struggled in the water for a while before standing up. The bank card that he had thrown at Yun Jian was smashed on his head by Yun Jian. Humiliation. This was a humiliation to him as a man, to a top international photographer. You woman, you actually dare to treat me like this. Jean Ching stood up from the hot spring, his entire body drenched. He used the hot spring water as he slapped the water fiercely, his face filled with anger as he shouted. On that artistic face, there was a frightening, ferocious expression. Everyone go. 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 There are so many of us, can't we even hold down a woman? Everyone go. Jean Ching stood in the hot spring and took pictures of the water, shouting at the male photographers and the female mannequins around them who were looking at Yun Jian. This group of people were undoubtedly Jean Cheng's men. After Jean Cheng's desperate shout, the surrounding people stopped in their tracks. However, this group of male photographers all surrounded Yun Jian, trapping Yun Jian in a circle. The sound insulation of this hot spring restaurant was very good, and because it was a natural hot spring, the female hot spring and the male hot spring were very far apart. This meant that the male hot spring where CE was at and the female hot spring where Yun Jian was at were separated by hundreds of meters. Furthermore, Jean Ching had already bribed the restaurant, so if Yun Jian was an ordinary woman, it would be useless even if she screamed herself hoarse. Master Jean, that's enough, I think it's enough. She's still a young lady in her early 20s, don't force her anymore, it's not right. Moreover, our country has its own laws, this kind of coercion is illegal. Seeing that the male photographers had listened to Jean Cheng's words and surrounded Yun Jian, the kind-hearted woman whose young daughter accidentally fell into the hot spring and was caught by Yun Jian couldn't help but speak out to Jean Cheng. This woman and her daughter were all Jean Cheng's body art models. I'm contributing to Z country's art to the world. Illegal? Illegal? Can the police arrest me? Is there any justice in this world? Hearing the woman's words, Jean Cheng's temper suddenly flared up as he shouted at the woman. He didn't feel that he was in the wrong at all. He even thought that the law should be on his side for what he had done. Jean Ching had already gone mad. He even thought that using art as the premise of kidnapping her to force Yun Jian's words was above morality and the law. There was simply no way to save him. The dozen male photographers were about to pounce on Yun Jian at Jean Cheng's words when they heard him. However, at this moment, Yun Jian suddenly stepped on the ground, somersaulted in the air, and leaped over the head of one of the male photographers almost 2 meters high. In the next second, she steadied herself and was already outside the circle of male photographers. And her position was exactly where Jean Cheng was about to raise his leg to get out of the hot spring. Stretching out her leg, she stepped on the head of Jean Cheng, who was about to climb out of the hot spring. Yun Jian stepped on his head and directly pressed Jean Cheng's head, together with his body, into the hot spring water. Whoa! With Yun Jian stepping on his head and his head pressed into the water, Jean Cheng immediately felt suffocated. He struggled desperately but couldn't get away. Bubbles were emitted from Jean Cheng's nose that was buried in the water, and the water rippled. Just as Jean Cheng was about to suffocate, Yun Jian retracted her leg. However, she kicked Jean Cheng's body that had just regained his breath and stood up, kicking Jean Cheng directly to the shore. Then, under the horrified gaze of the group of photographers and women, she curved her red lips and smiled faintly at the group of male photographers. Take his body art photos. I'll reward whoever takes the best photos with $5 million. Book Guest House Reading Website. Chapter 2763. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Sister Jian ran away after fooling them. Yun Jian CE, page 1/1, when she saw Qing Yu's snake, lizard, and Diane. Yun Jian was at a loss for words. You guys broke the firewall I set up? Yun Jian asked Qing Yu and the others with a frown in front of Jean Mumu who was standing, Jean Cheng who was lying on the ground, a group of female models, and a group of male photographers. How's that possible? Sister Jian, I've been hacking the firewall you set up for 2 whole months and I don't have a clue. If it weren't for the address on the group photo envelope you sent us 2 days ago, we wouldn't even know where you went. Diane looked at Yun Jian like she had been dealt a huge blow, wailing like a ghost. As the leader of the Wuxia mercenaries intelligence team, she did not even have a clue on how to hack Yun Jian's firewall. It was so embarrassing if word got out. As the leader of the Wuxia mercenaries intelligence team, Dai Ani's hacking skills were the best in Wuxia. She even had a foothold in the international scene. Emin, Yun Jian answered softly and walked out. Humph, how dare you trick my sister Jian? Do you know who she is? Unfortunately, I have to inform you that everyone in the organization that went against Wuxia mercenaries the last time has been executed in half at the waist. How do you want to die? Qing Yu's hands were in her pockets, her fingers flicking the poison in the containers in her pockets. The containers contained the world's most toxic poison that Qin Yu had developed exclusively. You're really the boss of the kosher mercenaries. Jin Cheng, who was paralyzed on the floor, had his eyes bulging. Shuddering, he crawled up from the floor and picked up his torn clothes as he crawled toward the door in fear. He tried to leave. Why are you leaving? Sister Jian hasn't said anything yet. Qin Yu took 2 steps forward and stepped on Jin Cheng's head when she saw him running away. Sister Jian, what should we do with these people? Qin Yu stepped on Jin Cheng's head. No matter how the latter rolled, he was trampled to death. I'll give you a test product of the poison that was recently developed, Yun Jian said coldly without even looking at Jin Cheng, who was being stepped on by Qin Yu. After saying this, she walked out of the door of New Tang Hot Spring as usual. Then I won't hold back. Qin Yu rolled up her sleeves and glanced at Jin Cheng and the rest like she was looking at dead men. She then spoke to Diane, Snake, Lizard and the rest. Sister Diani, Sister Snake, come over and do me a favor. Hold them down for me. Qin Yu used this group of people as live test subjects. After tormenting them to the point that they were about to die, she clapped her hands and dragged Diane and Snake, Lizard outside. Come, let's gather within Hun group and bring Sister Jian and the rest back. Qin Yu clapped and was the first to walk out of the hot spring humming a tune. Diani, Snake, Lizard and the others followed suit. Just as they stepped out of New Tang Hot Spring, they saw the 4 leaders of an Hun group walking toward them. Emo Sun took the lead with Lin Wei at the back. Where's the young madam? This was the first thing Emo Sun asked when he met Qin Yu and the others. Sister Jian's out. She's waiting for us outside, Qin Yu replied. The 4 leaders of an Hun group as well as Diane and Snake, Lizard were taken aback. Qin Yu did not react in time. She heard the shrewd Snake, Lizard behind her exclaim, "Oh no! Sister Jian ran away when we weren't paying attention." Translator, Henyi Translations Editor, Henyi Translations. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.